G'day guys, we are live and we are talking all thing narrative events. You're here with the coach. I am excited as always, but I legitimately am extremely super crazy excited. I'm very, very excited about this particular discussion. It's one that I've wanted to have for a long time. It's one that I tried to set up earlier, and Mitzy and Jimbo don't know that I tried to do it, but it's like a little bit of a sneak. But this video is all about narrative events, and a lot of events get a lot of focus, whether it's team tournaments, one-on-ones, grand tournaments, but very little, in my opinion, is spoken about narrative events. So I want to talk a little bit more about Mitzy and Jimbo and the events that they run. So there's a little team that kind of runs these, what I think is the world's best narrative events. They will be humble and go, no, there's other cool events. Bullshit. There's also crazy cool events. We have Mitzy and Jimbo, or Jimbo and Mitzy, or Jitzy and Mimbo. G'day.
G'day, how are you?
I'm well. I've got a coffee. Have you got a coffee?
I absolutely have, and mine says, wow.
I'm on the tea. You know, it's England, so.
Hey,
mine says love.
Jimbo's on the tea, but more importantly, he's rocking his Thundercats mug, which is awesome. So
that is pretty impressive.
Color changing Thundercats mug. Thank you.
I'm very impressed, and I'm so excited about this. I even changed the name drop on the background. So, oh geez, wrong way. Change it called Name Your Heroes, because it is all about narrative gaming. It is forget your points, forget your match play, forget your General's Handbook. We are talking narrative events. And so the event that we're talking about here is an event called Raw. And the boys are going to tell me a little bit about why you should consider either playing narrative events, setting up a narrative event, or maybe some ideas to improve your narrative events. We're going to kind of deep dive into a little bit of their best practice, and hopefully for you event organizers, get some ideas to promote narrative events. And I've got a narrative event. I've run a couple of narrative events in the past, so I know how much fun they are to create them. And then you add Anvils of Apotheosis, Anvils of Apotheosis, which has just come out, and it's just supercharged the narrative space. So for me, I'm crazy excited, although I feel like I say that all the time. But if people don't know who you guys are because they haven't seen your channel, by the way, link in the description. Who are Mitzy and Jimbo? Mitzy.
Mitzy and Jimbo. So, well, I'm Mitzy, obviously, and that's Jimbo, quite obviously. Says it on the t-shirt. And we are a couple of gamers who've known each other for about, I think, 8 years now. And we are part of the Eat Bats gaming group in Cambridgeshire in the UK. And yeah, we kind of all hang out. We don't have a formal club, if you like, but we all have our own gaming spaces, and we chill out, play games whenever we can. And Jimbo and I decided to branch off and become social media superstars. And by superstars, I mean very, very, very small ones. But we like Warhammer, and that's what we decided to talk about. And yeah, that's where we are and how we're here.
I was just saying if Jimbo wants to add anything, maybe.
No, sorry. I didn't want to interrupt. I thought Mitzy was spectacular there, so I'll leave it to it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you, darling.
I'd vote Prime Minister for you, mate, especially if you start putting down Hops Hoedown at a national level. But we had the pleasure of meeting at Adepticon last year. I've been a follower of your channel for a long time. I think you guys bring a real interesting flair to our game, and it's one that I think I've always been really inspired about, seeing what you guys do. And you know, for someone who's in quite a competitive kind of mindset, it's very easy to get focused on points and war scroll effectiveness and, you know, all of that kind of just like, how do I win? How do I get 5-0? How do I handle the meta? But for you guys, it's completely different. And, you know, if I think about, you know, the narrative and Age of Sigmar, and probably in the last 12 to maybe even 24 months, ever since, was it Phil Kelly put out that video about the Mortal Realms, and, you know, we start getting maps, and we, you know, had Soulbound, and we've got Gur maps and Gairan maps and Akshi maps, and we're getting more and more detailed lore, and it's exciting to explore. And I think we could bring more to that to our gaming tables, and thus narrative gaming.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say, isn't it, Jimbo, that between us, you are sitting to the right of the narrative fence in that you're more of a competitive gamer. So you are looking at War Scroll effectiveness. You are looking at, predominantly match play, because that's kind of your niche. My niche has very much been, well, I never win a game of Age of Sigmar, so I may as well play narratively, and I enjoy that. I enjoy living in that bubble, I suppose. So, but that's not to say that Jimbo doesn't play narratively, because there is, with this game system that we all love and revel in, the ability to bring multiple sides of the game into your gaming experience.
Yeah, I think Mitzy's right. I do tend more towards the match play, but I do understand narrative as well. But I had to learn it. It's not something that kind of came natural to me. You mentioned earlier about Raw, which is Realms at War, which is the event we run with our two friends, Mingley and Steve Foote as well. And between the four of us, we all have quite different skill sets, which works really, really well. And my part in that one is to look for the word I hate, balance. Oh, don't like that. I can talk for hours on it. Not my thing at all. But to understand how things are going to work with each other, and that's where I can bring in and try and reel in the crazy ideas, the amazing crazy ideas that the other three will throw into the mix, and I try and make it work.
For me, I've always started to see that, people think about the pendulum, right? You've got the narrative, competitive, whack or win at all costs. Then you've got this other side of the pendulum, which is the narrative or the open play, the one where you throw points out the window, the ones that you start to create stories, and that is probably the primary driver. But for me, probably over the last 12 to 24 months, ever since I got involved into some narrative gaming and ran Coalescence Malign Portents, which was 2018, I think it was, maybe even 17 when I ran that very first one. For me, I started to realize that Warhammer isn't mutually exclusive between match play or a narrative play. There's this massive ground in between where we can still create stories. We all put so much effort into our paint schemes, name characters. We kit bash and convert to make a model our own. And I think we are finding the pendulum is swinging now in the center to kind of find that middle space, which is, again, why I'm really excited to talk to you both about narrative play and how we can start either creating more narrative events or bringing more narrative to your gaming.
I'd actually challenge you on that pendulum, Anthony. I would say, actually, I think often what it is, we get a triangle, and you have one side being narrative, one side being match play, and one side being open play. And then it's within that where your gaming can sit. So it can have elements of all three. And I'd say with Raw, we do have elements of all three. We're not pure narrative.
Yeah. We
bring in match play, we use that, we bring in a bit of open play as well. So they can all be mixed into different levels, however far you want to go.
I think if we're talking pure narrative, I think actually you hit the nail on the head. If you ignore the gaming aspect for 5 seconds and you take on the actual hobby aspect and the model building and all the rest of it, I think the very first time a hobbyist takes a model and thinks, do you know what? I don't like the head on that model. I'm going to put that head on that model from a completely different range or whatever. At that point, they are individualizing that model and they are becoming narrative in the way they want that particular model to sit, because it brings character to that model. And I think that's precisely where every hobbyist's immersion into narrative begins.
Yeah, I love it. And you just got to look at Twitter, you look at Instagram, you look anywhere that people are sharing their hobby, and there have been a couple of armies that I think have really supercharged the kit bashing and converting, Cities of Sigmar and Gargants even. Like, I'm looking at Gargants now and how many crazy Gargant players are going out there and kit bashing and converting. So many cool, whether it's Vince Venturella going his Frankenstein route, whether you're going through Ricky Smith, who's what he's doing from a narrative perspective. You got people who are using endless spells on their Gargants, people who are bringing in a whole bunch of different monsters and ideas, and pulling from the Bloodthirster kid or the Lord of Change kid. They made I saw a Great Unclean One kit bash with a Gargant, which was crazy cool. We're seeing more and more of that, and I think this is kind of now the time where I think that people are now getting more open to exploring the narrative. There was this perception a long time ago that Age of Sigmar had no lore. And I think a lot of people have been proven wrong, and there is some pretty cool rules and pretty cool lore and pretty cool stories that are now being told in the mortal realms. And for me, the narrative space, and full disclosure, I'm running a narrative event next year in March. And I've based mine around Beastgrave because the Beastgrave setting for me has been really, really cool. And we obviously know it from the game, but we haven't actually explored the mountain that is Beastgrave. And I'm like, cool, how do I tell this in a gaming format? So for me, this is selfishly as well learning about narrative events so I can be a better narrative event organizer. But before we get into that, I want to ask Mitzy, how did you get involved in running narrative events and organizing Age of Sigmar events?
I guess initially we started through Eatbats. Actually, we started running tournaments back in 8th edition. So it was a natural progression when Age of Sigmar came and the world as we knew it split and the gaming groups that we knew them split, to say, well, actually, we enjoy running events in 8th edition, and we only ran 2 or 3, but we had a good time doing it, and it was a chance for us all as mates to be in a room and have other mates turn up, and we were like, well, we need to continue doing that. So essentially we at the end of 8th we went to the Ming-vitationals, which was Ming Lee's farewell to 8th edition. Jimbo, myself, Steve Foote, a lot of other mates, people on the scene went down there. They were all invited by Ming to come down to Bristol, and we had a fantastic farewell weekend of playing 8th edition. I won't harp on about 8th edition anymore, but essentially while we were there, we had such a good time that Ming, myself and Steve Foote started just chatting online after the event to say, wouldn't it be great if we could, because the Ming-vitationals wasn't a straightforward 8th edition event. It was different. Ming had custom written rules for each of the generals for their armies. He'd handpicked what we could and couldn't do. And we had to all bring a story behind our army to the event. So he kind of kickstarted something in, I think, all of our brains. And we were like, well, that was actually a really fun weekend of playing wargaming. Let's translate that into AOS and let's launch an AOS event around that kind of premise, basically the narrative premise. So yeah, the 3 of us chatted. I then said to Jimbo, I need a hand, mate. We need to set this up. We're going to do it in Cambridge. Jimbo came on board in the chat and it just exploded. 5 years later, we're running the best narrative event in the world. You said it at the start of the show.
I would like to be proven wrong, but if you ask anybody in the narrative scene or anyone who's heard of narrative gaming, which event they want to attend, in match play, people talk about a CanCon, they talk about Adepticon, they talk about a South Coast GT and Blood and Glory. In your world, you guys are clearly, in my opinion, the top, and it gets to a point where Chuck Moore dressed up like Marathi, and we'll bring up photos a little bit later, but it's not just about a narrative game. It is people bringing their whole selves, bringing their story to life, and that is really exciting to see how people bring their own story and their community into the mix, and for me, that's the cool thing, as you said, bringing models to life, bringing stories to life, doing things in game that actually is at their detriment, but it's actually better from a story perspective. I think that's really cool.
I should just go back and clarify. Obviously, yes, we run Raw, and we really love the fact that we run Raw, and the 4 of us have absolutely immersed ourselves in it to the max. I think it would be fair to say that we drew a huge amount of inspiration from other events running. Okay, so Steve Herner's events over in the US, absolutely phenomenal. His tables and the effort that he put into them were inspiration on how we wanted our tables to look like, and we then ratcheted it up to 11 on the dial, if you like, in that way. But yeah, there were so many. Again, Steve Wren.
I was going to say Steve Wren. I've stolen so many ideas from Steve Wren with his achievement system.
Warhammer achievements has been a huge inspiration, and there's several others, too many to mention. But yeah, it's kind of and the Ming-vitationals right back at the beginning, sort of merging all of those things and throwing them out there to do what effectively was an event that we wanted to play in.
I think that, and I want to ask Jimbo for in a minute, what is a narrative event? Like, actually set the scene, especially, if I was someone who's only ever played match play. Maybe I played some team tournaments, maybe I played in some doubles, but I've never been exposed to narrative. But before I get to that particular point, the one thing that the biggest lesson that I've learned as an event organizer is that it's not my job to reinvent the wheel. I don't have to create this fully brand new concept to an event. There are so many cool players packs out there in the world that I can look at, be inspired by, take the best bits or the ones that most represent me and make my mongrel event. And obviously I can make my own things, but you don't have to start from the start. And I think if you are inspired by Raw, you're inspired by Holy Havoc, you're inspired by South Coast GT, take some of their ideas and make it your own.
Oh, definitely. I mean, we steal all sorts of stuff. That's it's there to be used. So, like you say, grab the best bits. And it's not just other events as well. I mean, we can talk about it a bit later on, but looking at rules in different systems as well. I've taken stuff from 40k and applied that to Raw, particularly actually the Gene Stealer cults, their ability to, when they set up, they blips on the table rather than actually having the models. And we've used that in battle plans before as well. I love that. I think that's really cool. So why not adapt it for Age of Sigmar?
I've gone through a lot of Warhammer Fantasy battles and looked at some of their campaigns just to see how they, whether it's a White Dwarf or an official campaign, again, there's some really cool ideas that you can kind of make into your own and like, well, how do I bring this to life? But talk to me, Jimbo, what is a narrative event? Imagine we're in an elevator and you're telling me about this whole thing called Raw, or just a general idea about narrative events. What do I expect as a player going into a narrative event?
So I think that's actually quite tricky to answer because there's a massive range on what a narrative event can be. It could be quite a simple narrative event. It could be quite a detailed narrative event. But getting down into it, there involves some form of a story. Now, that can be a story for the event itself, or it could be a personal story for each individual player. And what we try and do at Raw is we provide a framework. So there's an overarching story, but within that, the players, if they want to, they can develop their own story and run with it. If they want to just stick to the overarching story, that's absolutely cool as well. We try and make it really, really simple. It's not making it difficult. But what to expect is, I think I've got to keep in mind, we are wargaming. There is still, a lot of people think narrative means the armies are rubbish. It's not necessarily true. I can think some of the most narrative armies I can think of are actually extremely powerful. Say, take for example, an all eel list. I think that's quite narrative. The idea of having a general on his big seahorse and a load of eels following in, we know that's powerful. I think having lots of stonehorns is the idea of them all charging forward in a kind of mass stampede. Again, quite powerful. But it doesn't have to be like that. And you've got to think about how you compose your army and what your army will do. And you mentioned it earlier. Sometimes you don't do things that are actually the most efficient, but the best thing to do is try and think, what would they do in that situation? Would my bloodletters retreat? Doesn't sound like it to me. They should stay in there till the end, hacking away. It might be glorious death, but hey, that's what Khorne wants, isn't it? So thinking along those lines, rather than going, I need to retreat onto this objective so I can hold it for next turn to get so many points, XXX. That's not saying you do things that are definitely detrimental to your army. Sometimes you do want to do some different things, which we've built into Raw, having secondary objectives, and particularly at Raw 19, where the players had to hold or could hold objectives at the end of the game, but it wasn't a major part of what they did, but it did have an effect throughout the rest of the event. And that's also where narrative works. Each game then provides an effect to the next game, and it builds along, and that's how you get your story coming out. And it could be something as simple as having a character that upgrades at the end of every battle, which we did at our first Raw, at Raw Legends, Raw 16, which Steve Wren has done with Warhammer Achievements. I actually really like the way Steve did it. I wish we'd done it like that, to be honest, but hey, we all learn, don't we?
We build off each other, right? And you exactly. See someone do something else. Like I've looked at what you guys have done, and I think I was looking at, might have been Bill Castro, or I can't remember who was doing. Maybe someone who was running the narrative event in LVO in Las Vegas, and I remember looking at the way they'd done tokens. So one of the cool things that I was looking at as a tournament organizer, because when I do a match play tournament, most of the time I'm sitting behind the scenes, I'm doing some data entry, I'm clarifying rules questions. I'm taking photos. It's kind of my role at a traditional GT. But when I've run narrative events, I almost become, anyone who played Dungeons and Dragons or any role-playing game, I almost can become a dungeon master or a game master, and I can start to interact with the table. You talked about upgrading characters. I've said in my upcoming tournament, I'm being willing to be bribed. Bribe me. You want to take me to lunch and you want to try to gain favor from the gods? Try it. Who knows what's going to happen? I've always had this grand idea. I always wanted to borrow somebody's KO army and actually go to an event and try to offer each of my opponents $50 in cold hard cash to forfeit the game. I wanted to have cash. And I was always going to try to negotiate with players. So like game one, I was going to offer someone like $30. And if I could get away cheaper, I'd then put that $20 into the second game. And I would, come game 5, if people haven't taken my offer, I might have $200 to go forfeit the game, because a KO player or a KO story, they don't want to battle. They're traders. They want to maintain those relationships. And I always wanted to try, could I get away with bribery to win a tournament with cash? And I had like crazy ideas but I can bring that to life at a narrative event. I can do some crazy stuff.
So one of our players, sorry, Mitzy, one of our players at Raw 18 at Aethemy, the whole idea behind that was there was it's kind of alchemy effectively, and their aethemist, the guy who was mixing all the aether chemicals together, made this thing called aetheroin, which was a drug basically, and so he offered it to his opponent every game, and it massively boosted their characters' abilities. It made them really powerful, but they had a chance of dying immediately. And he went through the whole event doing that, just off basically putting these drugs out to everyone. It was hilarious. Absolutely brilliant.
I think if we come back to the expectations, I think my advice to anyone thinking of attending a narrative event would be simply to not go to the narrative event as an event player, but to go to the narrative event making sure that they are there as the general of their army or as an upcoming lieutenant in their army, and go in there actually with the headspace that I am that model on the table and I'm going to be interacting. So therefore, what I'm not seeing the table from a player perspective, I'm seeing the table from a model perspective, and therefore, can I actually see those guys around the back of that building? I know they're there because I'm a player, but am I actually naturally going to be going that way if something over there is attracting my attention? Do you see what I mean? And getting actually into the mindset of your army rather than the mindset of an event player perspective.
It brings RPG. It does bring role playing to the table, and I think again, if I look at Twitter and Instagram, I'm a Dungeons and Dragons player. I'm currently playing in a campaign. Been playing since 2nd edition, and really enjoy it. And there's a lot of people, whether they play MMORPGs, whether they play regular RPGs, whether it's Soulband, Dungeons and Dragons, Vampire the Masquerade. People play role-playing games, and it allows you to kind of bring some of that to the table and have a whole bunch of fun. Whether you want to cosplay, whether you don't want to cosplay, whether you just want to make some decisions on the table. I think for me, and again, depending on who you are, and if you're listening to this, if you are a player thinking about coming to a narrative event and this sounds interesting to you, whether you want to explore the lore of Age of Sigmar or you want to start playing a different style of game, highly recommend going. If you're inspired by this kind of concept, you're like, I'd like to bring a story to life. For me, I mentioned Beastgrave. I talked about the mountain of Beastgrave full of treasures and riches and undead, and the death magic has been seeped in. And I've created a story to basically say to the people, you either want to defend it and stop it from getting into the wrong hands because there's a lot of arcane treasures and stuff, or you want to take it over. And there'll be a whole bunch of story that'll come in during the weekend. But I want to put some context in, and I'm going to share a short little trailer video about one of the many events. So Mitzy, Jimbo, Team Raw, they have a different theme every year. So it's this continuing narrative that are very different, and each of the events look very different. So to put some context into this, I'm going to play a short video and then we'll kind of bring some of this to life. So hopefully I get demonetized for having Queen going on and across YouTube gods. But if I'm a player looking at this and I'm like, okay, there's something magic, right? And there's some combinations going on here. What was the story you were trying to tell here with this particular video? Maybe Jimbo, I'll throw it to you, maybe.
Yeah, so I think that was the first video we put out just to advertise. That was Raw 18, Aethemy. That was really fun.
My all-time favourite pre-release of one of our events, I have to say.
so much fun, that video. So the idea behind it, I mentioned earlier, it's kind of about alchemy, but the principle of how, what's the principle? I think the first little inkling of idea we had about that was actually, you mentioned him earlier, Phil Kelly's writings, actually. Some of the text he put out. I think it was on Warcom at the time. I can't quite remember, but he was talking about the edge of the realms where things can blur, reality kind of blurs, and he said weird things kind of happen near the edge of the realms. And one of the things that can happen is you could turn into a potato. And I read that line and I thought, now that sounds like fun. How can I turn people into potatoes? And so we came up with this idea of Aethemy. And again, I mentioned earlier. So each player bought their own little character they custom made, which was called the Aethemist, and we provided a deck of cards, which Mitzy is showing there. And then the players they gained the cards during the game. They could then use these cards to then create effects. This is an incredibly simple kind of mechanic that Steve developed. It was absolutely insane, but it was so cool. And the other thing, the idea of turning a potato, if things go hideously wrong when you are doing this Aethemix, again, it's you choose the cards, you roll 2 dice, very much like magic. But if you roll double one, you turn into a potato. That was it. It's pretty simple. So as you can guess, the idea of it was quite comedy. So we went very, very kind of Pratchett-esque on that, which works for me because when I'm writing stuff, I write quite a lot of background for it. I find writing comedic kind of stuff like that a lot easier. I do find writing serious stuff.
Well, I mean, if anyone looks at Warhammer, and if anyone's been in the game for a long time, you would see that Warhammer has been a very comedic game since day 0. During Grim Dark, it's kind of lost a little bit of it during the Grim Dark era. But if you look at the roots of Warhammer, it is very funny. There's a lot of subtle comedy. There's a lot of Easter eggs. There's a lot of silliness. It's very English slapstick at times. And being Australian, who's essentially half American, half English, I do really appreciate that funny slapstick stuff that is just very British humor.
Yeah. I think don't take Raw as a kind of event that is silly, but there's always comedy gold in any event, in any game. There is always a moment, I find, when I'm playing my opponent that we laugh about something that just happened. It could be something completely ridiculous, like you've got 5 units about to make a charge and you roll double ones on all of them, so you don't make the 3-inch with any of them, and it changed. There's always a moment in gaming where you laugh about it, and I think with Raw we try to take an event and make it just a good, fun weekend of gaming. It isn't serious. It is serious because there's an overarching story and all of the players are adding to that story, and the story evolves throughout the weekend, and their armies evolve throughout the weekend and things change for them. But ultimately we're there to have 30 to 40, upwards of 40 players having a real good, fun time, but also being 100% immersed in the weekend. And you touched on it earlier, where as a previous, as a match play TO, you're very much behind a desk, you're very much data entry, you're very much, just getting in checks and balances all the way through.
Some rules inquiries, like
absolutely.
Shake hands, kiss babies. I'm very much a politician. Like you just making sure everyone's having a good time.
But at Raw, and indeed, as you've said, you very much become a dungeon master. And after our first event, after the Legends weekend, we always push back to the players and we always say, right, guys, what could we do better? What would you like more of? What 2 or 3 things would you suggest? And the majority of people after that first weekend said, we want your interaction more in the room. So effectively, from that moment forward, we were like, we basically need to be GMs. And ultimately, we'd love to have a GM at every table. but there are 4 of us. So how do we do that? And and that then influences, I guess, the events themselves, because like last year, we had the Brightmane and Dracafoot political campaign going off. And that was very much that one. There's Brightmane down in the bottom corner there, and Dracafoot front and center, as he always likes to be. But yeah, we essentially wanted to run 2 factions and lead a political, a political uprising against the establishment, and get the players on board with the 2 leaders of the factions to try and outwit the others. And so we very much became part of the weekend. And we'd done it the previous year with the 4 gods. We all had a different T-shirt on. So each of us were a god, a chaos god, interacting with the players on the tables and generally giving boons and what have you to our favourite players, if you like, or those that needed a boost at the time, or perhaps needed knocking down a peg or 2.
I think that last year, Raw 19, when we had the 2 characters, does show very much how our Team Rawsome, the 4 of us, work together. Because I'd always push back on the idea of having kind of cosplay for us, because it's not something I'm particularly comfortable with. I don't like doing that kind of thing. It's not me at all. But we decided to go with it. Group decision. I was like, okay, fine, we'll do that. And Mitzy and Steve dressed up as the 2 characters and performed in character for the whole weekend, which is something I can't do. It's not in my skill set. It's not something I'm comfortable with. But those 2 guys are amazing at it. But that left me free to deal with the admin behind the background. It just shows how the team works. So we're really lucky like that, and we take advantage of everyone's different skills and what they're good at. And those 2 guys were amazing. I mean, Mitzy, I have to say, is the London Ogre of Brightmane. I mean, it's the character that made the event. Everyone knows who that is. It was incredible, absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and I think ultimately what we have as a foursome, and I would say that you don't have to have 4 people to run a narrative event. You've said it yourself, Anthony. You're running one in March. We just happen to have come together with 4 people with different skill sets. So we're looking at the Athemy deck for Athemy. Steve Foote, his profession is graphic design. He has that skill set. All the videos, all the smart logos, all of the razzmatazz, if you like, he's able to digitize and then put into print form. So we're able to pull together, a pack that's beautifully presented and add additional bits. And the deck of cards was something that we really wanted each player to be able to take away with them. So, it's a fully presented deck of cards, printed, all 6 sides. 52 cards inside, all with different functions. And we got them professionally printed, all part of the entry fee. And that forms a game that you can play outside of our event. And so I think the one thing that we wanted was to try and allow players, and we said it at the beginning, Jimbo said a framework. I like to call it a sandbox. We put down a set of rules. We put down an overarching story, and we put down some specific battle plans and scenarios that allow people to interact differently with the terrain, with each other, and to try and create their own narrative whilst adding to the major narrative. And I think, being able to essentially turn up and go, oh, wow, that looks different. I've never played on a table with this much terrain in it. How is that going to affect my army? How is it going to affect the game itself? Because that's one thing that we really like to do, is flood tables with dramatic scenery to give people the opportunity to play in a different style.
For me, when I look at narrative gaming, and I think for any aspiring TOs out there or even a TO who's already doing narrative events, what you're trying to do is you're not trying to determine an ultimate winner of your event. It's not about the person who goes 5-0 or has the most kill points and the objective scored. What you're really trying to do is foster a set of stories, and hopefully when you get people coming to the table, you are looking for a shared story experience where something you are both going for something, where, and there's been times where I've been playing narrative, and let's say we do a match play scenario. We'll say, well, okay, well, your army versus my army, we've got a couple of objectives. what are the objectives? What actually is it on the table? Yes, in the game it's a marker, but what actually is it? Is it some Sigmarite? Is it something we're trying to stop you from claiming because it's going to allow you to do X? One of the things that I'll be doing in my event in March is my objective tokens, or I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of, I've got an industrial amount of those Azurite Ruin treasure boxes, those little boxes. Games Workshop were very fortunate to sponsor one of my events, and I've got 1 million of them, literally 1 million. But I'm going to paint them all up and I'm going to drop them on tables like treasure chests. Again, Beastgrave is full of old treasures. And during the game, I want people to start competing for them. And when they open the treasures, there will be tokens and prizes that they can come to a caravan and trade in. So they can actually be the person who acquires the most wealth, or they might actually upgrade their force. They actually might, their hero might get better. They might be able to find more artifacts that improve them in the game. And it doesn't matter. I'm gonna have a whole bunch of prizes and support for the person who has the most gold, and the person who has the most amount of artifacts, and the person who does find the most treasure chests. But it's not about who has the most. It's about the story that you tell along the way, and hopefully everyone has a great time. I think for me, that's how I see a narrative event, and hopefully my rules and my players pack and the way I run it tries to foster that fun shared story experience.
Yeah, I think you mentioned winning there, and that's a question we get asked quite a lot. Actually, is how do you win a narrative event? It's a good question, frankly. The way we deal with it is we don't tell people the story mechanics; they can't game it, so they don't have any choice. Basically, it's go and have some fun, and you'll find out what happens at the end. So we have quite complicated metrics and lots of things that feed into it to determine how we decide, or how we determine a winner, as it were. Excuse me. But we do it differently. So last year, again, Raw 19, we had the two factions, and we knew at the start one faction would win, and they'd all win. Every player was on that faction, so half the players at the event would win effectively, and yeah, they get themselves a medal, as Mitzy is showing there.
Lovely.
That was how we decided to do it, and it also involved online voting as well. We went out on Twitter, did Twitter polls. I think it came down. There was one vote in it in the end.
There was.
That's like 400 votes. There's one vote in it.
I voted. I remember voting. I made sure to vote.
It was brilliant.
I'm not going to ask you which way you swung, but I'm hoping it was my way. Okay.
But that was so much fun. But yeah,
it really was, because literally on the Saturday night we all went back to Jimbo's house. We'd sort of stayed late, because we always stay late into the evening, so there's always like the games during the day, and then we encourage all of the players to stay with us. So we get takeouts in, everyone kicks around, and we always try to have an additional mini game on a Saturday evening that then allows the players to just freely mingle with one another, interact with one another. And if they do stay, there's an additional little bonus that they can roll into the next day. So it's a good way of getting everybody to stay in the room. To be honest, everyone likes staying in the room anyway, because there's always, it's bring your own beer scenario, and everyone kicks around and chews the card after a day of gaming, and then just carries on going. But yeah, we literally got back to Jimbo's at about 11:30 that night, and the Twitter poll was live. The four of us were just sat there counting votes until it closed at midnight. It was great. It was a real for us, because it meant that we then knew how we had to then play the second day and what we were going to do the following day to try and come back from that if you were on the losing end. It was really good fun.
So I guess what I'm hearing as well is you've got an opportunity to tell a story, and one of the things that I've really enjoyed with Raw, there's been certain rules, like I don't know if all of the rules have had this, but you can create factions, you can create the Four Gods, you can have your own factions. I think one of your events you might have had 8 different factions and split up your player pool by like 8 or 6 different, I guess, alignments or different types of objectives, and players can jump around and try to influence the outcome of the game. The Aethemy, for example, I'm going to share another little short video in a second, which one of my little favorites. That with Aethemy, it allowed you to create a wizard wagon, or essentially, if I'm going to try to create all of this these combinations of aethamy, and I'm going to grab ingredients and I'm going to try to put them together and try to find that winning combination that's going to get me whatever it is. I need a wizard wagon. I need somewhere that my aethymist can actually mix up my potions. And in game, that also could be an opportunity for then me to deny or take over, or maybe I steal. Maybe I can steal some of your ingredients. But I want to show this little short video again. Kind of shows a little bit about what these wizard wagons are all about. Man, that gets me fired up. And like I know the next event you guys are running is cog forts, and you're going to be building a cog fort during the event. But again, I guess what I'm trying to show any aspiring tournament organizers or event organizers is just the creativity you can bring to the table. Maybe you tap into an existing story, whether it's Soul Wars and deep dive into something about Soul Wars. Maybe you want to start to explore, the battle of light and shadow with Slaanesh and really unpack that. Maybe you want to bring a whole different story to the table and bring the Bad Moon, or maybe Sylvaneth, and bring up Alariel and her absolute wrath and supercharge that because, she's gone enough is enough. Whatever that story is, the Return of the Stormcast, the next Cities of Sigmar. Maybe you want to start to explore the next Mortal Realm and try to maybe start creating some of those cities in, I don't know, Shimon or Shaiish. You can tell that story and then create some of the battles and create some of the characters to either push back or to create those cities.
Yeah, I think for us, the wonderful thing about the Age of Sigmar and putting together the first Raw event, Legends, was that we recognised that the event is realms at war. So we wanted multiple realms to be featured at the event. So the initial idea was essentially to say, right, we're going to have 20 tables or 25 tables, and each of those sets of tables are going to be divided into 4. So you're going to have 4 tables in a row that become one realm. There'll be a realm for Gur. There'll be a realm for Akshi. There'll be a realm for whatever. Okay. And GW, with the rule set and realm gates, gave us an amazing tool to say, right, those 4 tables aren't divided by a line. Those 4 tables, that's one realm. You might be at one end of the 12-foot bank or the 24-foot bank or whatever, but your mate might be at the other end. There's nothing stopping you walking 24 feet up that end towards that end of the table. The players, the 10 players or the 8 players around that realm are fully free to interact with one another. Yes, you've got individual game on. Yeah, you've got an individual battle plan. But if you want to interact with the guy next to you, or if you want to walk through a realm gate and end up in Akshi and you're currently in Gur, fill your boots. The world is your oyster. The realm is your oyster.
So I could have like a unit of Shadow Warriors, for example, and we know and Shadow Warriors come from the side of the board. I could bring those Shadow Warriors on somewhere else completely in the realm and assist one of my teammates or assist someone that, I don't know, maybe I've got a gripe with someone, I want to shoot their hero. I could do that. I could literally do that and tell a story. And
100%.
Sorry, Mitzy.
No, go on, carry on.
I was to say, one year we had 2 players who'd agreed their own narrative beforehand, and basically one of them was chasing the other. And so they spent the entire event legging it across the table after the other guy trying to get him.
That's amazing. Yeah, and I want to bring.
They'd had this grudge, that they just wanted to fulfill. Absolutely.
That's absolutely brilliant. I want to bring up a question from Laura in a second, who kind of talks a little bit more about the personal narrative. But I know one thing that I'm going to be doing in my upcoming event, and because my event's going to be driven by this in-game currency, and I've actually printed off these Sigmar coins that people use in Warhammer fantasy role-playing. So I've got a 3D printer. I printed these cool tokens, like basically money. They're Sigmar money. They've got the comment on it. They're very cool. But I'm actually going to allow people to try to bribe me to assassinate an opponent's general. So they can actually pay me a whole bunch of their in-game currency, and attempt an assassination. And if they fail, and obviously they're going to do that before the game, right? They're going to come to me before the round starts and go, hey, here's my coins. Can you have a crack at my opponent's general or hero? If they fail, I'm going to let them know they tried it and then see what kind of wrath happens after that. Like we're hearing now that they tried some sneaky tricks against them. But I think that's where we can really unlock some creativity, some craziness. If you, as a tournament organizer or an event organizer, if I see someone's really struggling, why not have some divine intervention? I'm like, oh, cool, you can bring back those units. Hey, here's a couple of free rerolls. Divine intervention. The gods are, the bad moon is shining bright on you. Oh, the bad moon's over here. Oh no, it's not over here now. I've moved the bad moon, and like I can do whatever I want. But obviously, as long as it's helping people have fun. I don't want to be a jerk, but creating a fun story.
Yeah,
sorry, Mitzy, go on.
we do it every time. I think that that's kind of the other aspect of narrative gaming that we need to touch on is that as a TO of a match play, you get potentially rule questions. At a narrative event, the first one we run at Legends, Steve came over to us and said, "I've just been asked if a player can go through a realm gate and go and do this." And he said, I just said to him, what would your general do on the table? Is that something that they would potentially want to do as part of their quest? And if the answer is yes, then fill your boots. So the questions from a TO perspective isn't this rule says that, this rule says that, how do we play it? The answer is always at our events, well, what would you do? And is that going to affect someone else? And is it going to negatively impact on their game or not? If the answer is no, do it. If the answer is yes, but actually they're on the opposing team, do it anyway. That's what this whole storytelling scenario is about, basically.
I was about to make exactly the same point as Mitzy just made. Brilliant. I think we've only ever had like 2 questions. We barely get any questions at Raw anyway, because people just get on with it. But we've only ever had 2 questions. We've had to like make a rule on ourselves. The rest of the time people ask us stuff and we go, well, what do you guys think would happen in this situation? And they look at each other and go, well, I think this would happen. I think this would happen. Yeah, that sounds about right, doesn't it? It's like, well, I'm superfluous to the operation. You guys crack on.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. You're showing photos there of realm beasts. So that's what possibly my favourite moment in Raw. Because that was Leviathan, so that was 2017. Yeah, 2017. We ran Realms at War Leviathans, and I suppose you showed the video earlier of the Aether Labs. One of the things that we like to try and do with all of the events is to say to the players, this is what you're coming to do. This is the overarching story. We've given you some hooks and some what have you. You don't have to prepare a fully narrative army. You can bring to our event 1,500 points of anything. You cannot bring a named character. There's no restrictions on what models you can bring in the army. You've just got to bring a selection of models, and you're going to play varying size games. So on the day, you'll just say, right, well, I think I need these items to play this game or these units. The one stipulation is we don't allow named characters. So you can't bring Gotrek to Raw. You can't bring Nagash to Raw. Any named characters are out. You can only bring heroes, and you can only bring the units from the books. And because we want those players to ultimately have thought about those lesser heroes and developed some kind of storyline for themselves. But then the other stipulation is, well, it's not a stipulation. We encourage people to take the theme of the event, and like the Aether Lab, like Leviathans, like Legends, we want them to bring a model to represent something, because that then means they don't have to focus on 2,000 points of army. They are focusing on a model, and every player who comes to the event has the time and the ability to put something together for that one model. And so for Leviathans, which you're showing there, they were the sketches that we did for the Leviathans, but we asked the players to bring a Leviathan, which they had to then capture, and we gave them a base size. So I think it was the
it's a large oval. It was
large oval base. Your Leviathan can be a monster of any type. You can kit bash it. You can use a model to represent it. You can do what you want. Create a model to represent a Leviathan. Obviously, they can then theme it to their army. So it could have been a giant for destruction with platforms on it or whatever you fancy. But that's your Leviathan. You've got to capture that at the event. And so we hook, line and sinkered the players into thinking that they were bringing Leviathans to our event, Leviathans. But what you can see there are sketches of the Leviathans. And I think the one on the left, the Sand Genie, you can see a little model to the right of him, which is representing, a Liberator or whatever. That was a Leviathan. And we then created these enormous Leviathans, realm beasts, if you like. And when everyone went home on the Saturday night, we then cleared the realms, plonked our Leviathans on the table, rearranged the realms, and when the players came in on the Sunday morning, they were like, "Oh my word, what is going?" And people's faces were just like,
Brilliant.
because we had these enormous monsters that they all then had to band together to fight against.
Well, you say everyone's jaws dropped. Wasn't there one person that came in and didn't notice?
Yeah, I think it was Chris Tomlin, wasn't it?
And from the photos, like when we talk about large here, we are talking crazy big, at least 2 feet by 2 feet. Like they were,
I think
proper size, like armies on parade board size thing.
Yeah. So the realm of beasts had the rock monster, and its mouth was a realm gate. So if you imagine the size of a realm gate with then a head around it, and then the body and the 4 legs, it was about 4 foot square, I think.
With all of this discussion, I guess, the point that I probably want to make to anyone who's listening to this and thinking about, a narrative event is it doesn't have to be as crazy as we're making it sound. But what I want to highlight here is you can really unlock your creativity and your potential and not be kind of strung to, this box of match play. And I love match play, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love it, but you don't have to use 18 scenarios. It can be as simple as finding some of the battle plans that are currently sitting in your battle tomes, and every battle tome has one scenario. Why not bring that to the life and tell a story? I know I played at an event a few years ago, Sydney Slaughter, Chris Welfare and James Mabry from the Mortally Wounded podcast. They'd actually stitched together 5 of those scenarios, made some minor tweaks, and it was all about the chaos intervention. And really, one of them was one of my favorite games was the Crystal Labyrinth, where basically the 6x4 was split up into 2 feet by 2 feet blocks. And there was little doors that connected each of the boxes. It was literally meant to be Zench's Crystal Labyrinth. And there was little realm gates that you would jump through to kind of move through the boxes. You could only shoot what was in the box. You'd only cast spells at what was in your box. And you're jumping around and, you could shoot through the portal. Sometimes it would shoot back at you. And I played against Liam Burnett Blue and his Sylvaneth. And it was just absolutely crazy. Told some really cool stories. And then there was another game where I played. It was more of a Khorne arena where there's just like a little arena in the center. I played Ash McEwen and his Iron Jaws at the time. And if you cast magic or you shot near the temple, Khorne would actually smite you and actually would do some mortal wounds and actually hurt you, because we know Khorne doesn't like shooting. Khorne doesn't like magic. He wants to favor the people who get in the center and absolutely just beat the crap out of each other. So there's a lot of cool stories you can tell, and it kind of ties into what I referred to earlier from Laura, where Laura had said, when you're thinking about designing your narrative event, how much do you worry about making, sure that armies have their own lore hook for that event? Is that important, or is that something that you allow people to kind of develop along the way, or at all?
So the way we deal with it is we mentioned it earlier, we try to have quite a wide-ranging framework, is how we set out Raw. Every Raw is started with a simple idea, a really simple idea, whether it be an upgradable hero, upgradable monster, alchemy, or just some political machinations. It's relatively simple, and then we just design the battle plans. We think about what would happen. So Leviathan is actually a really good example. We want to make an upgradable monster. How would you do it? Well, first of all, you got to capture a monster. Then you want to train the monster. Then you want to get the monsters to fight each other. And then there's the big surprise with the big monsters that people didn't know about. So the battle plans we had on the first day were literally that. It's like the first one is go and capture your Leviathan. Then the second one will be you've got to train it somehow. And the third one, the training one was really good. I think we called that the race. And both players started on the same side of the board and had to get to the other side first of all. But they're literally running alongside each other and then trying to fight each other.
They're elbowing themselves along the way as they're trying to get to the...
Yeah, absolute madness. So it's just thinking like that. But all those things aren't prescriptive to each player's storyline if they want to have their own. That they can still do that within it. We're not... There's this wide-ranging story, but within it they can do whatever they like, and we're quite happy with that. You know, as we said earlier, that's the whole idea. We're giving people, as Mitzy said, a sandbox to tell their own story if they want to, or they can join in with ours.
I think the key thing also that we should point out is that there should be absolutely no nervousness about attending a narrative event, right? You because you know we put up we spend an awful lot of time, you know, trying to promote the event online and building up a pre-event, you know, trying to whip people into a frenzy and get people on board with what we're doing, and that's in a way to get people's creative juices going who are coming to the event. We're giving them snippets of story as we're approaching the event, and trying to give them the ability to then draw that story into their own army. And I think the other thing that we do is we obviously there's an incredible array of talent and model making ability and kit bashing ability and painting ability. We have a huge spectrum of hobby ability at the events, and nobody should ever come to a narrative event feeling like they're inferior to anyone else, or feel threatened by the fact that I've had to create a Leviathan or I've had to create a hero. At the end of the day, it's your hobby. You put in as much time and effort and energy into your hobby as you want, and you're not going to be in any way, shape or form overshadowed by other people at the event. Everyone there is there for the same purpose. They've all got the same mindset, and they're there to have fun, basically. So I think don't ever think that just because it's a narrative event and because I don't play D&D or I don't come from a role play environment background, that you're not going to fit in. It's Age of Sigmar. It's just had some of the rules taken away so that you're playing it in a slightly different way, but it's still Age of Sigmar.
And you can stretch the narrative as much as you want, right? At my tournament, my match play tournament, I provide 1 tournament point if you name your characters on your army list. So in Australia, it is customary that people submit their army list to the tournament organizer 2 weeks in advance, so we can check the lists and we can do all that stuff, publish them all in advance. But I will actually reward them 1 tournament point for naming all of their characters. And there has been some crazy cool character names that have been brought to me. Daughters of Cain, who have named all of their hag queens over American rap singers, right? You know, like Queen Latifah and, you know, Cardi B and all that stuff, right? That was literally all their hag queens. I had this one Skaven player who literally gave me about a quarter of a page for this person's name. This one is like Skaven rat, blah, 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 blah. It just went on forever. But it can be as simple as that. I've seen other events where people will actually write up their own little battle reports on behalf of the general. So you can kind of unlock that stuff. It could be having little floating islands. I know Dark Fantastic Mills, or you could make it with foam. You could actually do that and just create some different spaces to play in, or the realm gates. Again, you can create this and stretch this as much as you want, or you could go completely into your own narrative. I
think match play players won't like this. Match play, in my opinion, is easy play. It is. You know, you sit there, you've got your points. If someone says, let's play a 2,000 point game, we'll use one of the match play battle plans. You know immediately how big the army you're having is, how big the army that your opponent's having, what's likely to be in it, to be honest, if you're pretty competitive, and you know exactly how the battle plan works. So you can rock up to the table, you can go up to someone you've never met before in your life, and you know exactly what you're doing. Narrative play involves a bit more interaction with your your opponent, your co-player, however you want to refer to them. So you have
I like co-player, by the way. I like that because the opponent is, it's an arm wrestle. Someone's going to win, someone's going to lose. But actually, it's a shared story.
Exactly. I really like it too. And that does reflect more on narrative play. You do have a co-player. You're both telling a story in somehow. And you do have a lot more interaction with the person on the other side of the table, or something the same side of the table as you. Which to me, actually, is one of the reasons why we get pretty much everyone staying on the Saturday night. Is because they're all talking. Everyone's making friends. There's a lot of people that know each other from the scene anyway. But we do get new people every year, and who've never been to an event, and they dive straight on in because they're having that interaction with people the whole time. It really engenders a community within the event itself. It wouldn't surprise me one day if the whole lot of them all turn on us in the event and throw some story back at the four of us and just completely go mental. Yeah. It wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
I love it. I would actually, I could see that happening, right? They're just like, no, we don't accept this, and we're actually going to do this.
Which is great.
I'm actually surprised it hasn't happened yet. But yeah, I think Jimbo's absolutely right. We tend to find that if people have come to us for the first time, there's a little bit of nervousness when they first arrive, but literally within 5 minutes of game one, it's Age of Sigmar. There is much more social interaction, I would say, at a narrative event. Don't get me wrong. Every game of Age of Sigmar for me is a social interaction. I want 100% my co-player to have an enjoyable game. And that's my entire outlook on gaming. It is gaming, and I want to have a sociable, fun experience with my opponent. But that nervousness is lost immediately, and I think that is that's a testament to the community as a whole, frankly, because we have male, we have female, we have all everyone just turns up and has fun.
You have Chuck Moores,
and everybody is welcoming, and even when Chuck Moore is dressed as a hag queen.
Tay Rathy, come on, Tay Rathy.
Tay Rathy, absolutely.
I'm not going to yuck his yum, but like that was there was some scrubbing of the eyes for a set period of time after that.
And that's the other thing. We traditionally held our event over the Halloween weekend. So when we did the first one, it was like, it's Halloween weekend, guys. Let's have fun. If you want to come dressed up. Do what you like. And some players took it to the extreme, dialed it up to 11. Ben Mardle turning up as an Archnaut one year was epic, and he actually won the best costume award for that year. He even had the floating balloon.
I think he was a rigger.
Yeah, he was a rigger. Yeah. Oh, sorry, not an Archnaut.
Amazing.
A rigger. Yeah, absolutely.
I dressed up as a necromancer once. I went to an event as a necromancer with my legion of Nagash. That was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's not a prerequisite, so you don't have to feel threatened by it. You don't have to feel awkward about it. You can just come and laugh at those that do it. And what we typically find is people, don't do it one year, but the next year they're like all in, right? I'm going fully dressed up as whatever.
Yeah, I think going back to Chuck, he walked into the room dressed as Tay Rathy. And you got to think he'd obviously come over from America with his wife. His wife was there with him as well. She's awesome. He walked into a room of people he'd never met before. There were 40 of us in there. He'd met me and Mitzy, and that was it. 40 people dressed up in that outfit. I mean, he feels comfortable enough to do that. That's pretty impressive, I think. That's some good dedication. And we also had Paul Buckler. He did what did he do?
Dressed as Dorothy.
Dorothy, that was it. Yes. Yeah, dressed as Dorothy. I mean, that was a horrific image as well.
That was when we did the war bands, wasn't it? Raw bands, and players had to bring a selection of individual models, and he themed his entire raw band around the Wizard of Oz characters.
Yeah.
So he pitched up as Dorothy. Oh, look at Chuck.
Oh, there's Chuck.
I had to bring it up. And Chuck had absolute fun. Again, I think what we're showing here is just the testament of the environment that you create, that people can have fun and they can dress up like that Arcanaut, like a Necromancer. They can bring some cosplay weapons. They can dress up like Morathi, Teyrathi, which is Chuck. If anyone wants to hear about Chuck, I think I had Chuck on an episode about 6 months ago talking about personal narrative and kind of seeing the evolution of his character, creating one hag queen that eventually become a rival to Morathi, based on Taylor Swift becoming Teyrathi. And the story has grown exponentially over years as he's had more battles, as he's dug more into the lore. He's created this crazy timeline. And it all started with a small little fire, which was a narrative fire. And by telling stories, again, as a player, you asked Chuck about Teyrathi. If you look at Chuck's Twitter handle or Twitter profile, you'll just see some amazing, crazy hobby. And, he's not running Hagnar. He's running Kraith, which, he best represents his temple. But he's so passionate about it. And I think for me as an event organizer, it helps me unlock those stories. I think that's the role that I play, is unlocking people's stories and then seeing them grow over time, either within my own event or 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now. People probably still tell the story about Teyrathi. Will still tell the story about, as I mentioned 3 years ago from my battle against Liam Burnett Blue in the Crystal Labyrinth. But if you asked me about my 5 or 6 games at CanCon 3 years ago, I'd struggle. I would struggle. I'm like, I might have played this. I remember that one player, Michael Thompson, who Curse of Years my whole swordsman unit. But other than that, I forget everything from CanCon 2018.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the other thing, is that we have players who came to Legends, who played someone, and they then created that story over that weekend, and outside of the overarching story, the following year they're back. There's a vendetta against that player, so that story has continued, and we've got players there who've got like 4 years worth of story and history, and they bring the same characters back each year and just evolve them. And then take them also out into, match play events. They still refer to them as Teyrathi. They still refer to them as the named character that they've got. And they're using them on the table. And someone will say, well, why are they called Teyrathi? Oh, well, because blah, 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 blah.
How does that make you feel as an event organizer who's helped contribute to that story?
You asking me? I think it's amazing. I love the fact that we've pulled together 40 players and we've thrown them into this sandpit, and they've then taken it, run, and have developed it themselves. And we've got players like Phil and Charles, who are now running. They came last year, and they're now running their own narrative event in the new year, which Jimbo, myself, and Steve are going to. And forgive me, my brain has just gone completely dead, and I've forgotten the name of it.
Whitney Warhammer 1.
Whitney Warhammer 1. There you go, Jimbo. I knew he'd be the man with his finger on the pulse.
He's got your back. He's got your back.
And they've really embraced it, and they now play narrative. And Steve, to be fair, has developed a little narrative gaming group in Oxford, and they're really embracing it and taking it forward. And for me, that's ultimately what we want. Yeah, we did Raw because we wanted to put on an event that the four of us would want to go to and play at. And what we're really trying to do is say that this is how narrative works. This is the fun you can have doing it. These are the lore hooks that you can tap into and develop with your own armies, etc., etc. And we're hoping one day that we're going to Whitney Warhammer because we know that the guys there have fully embraced narrative, and hopefully we're gonna experience the other end of it, and actually go and play in it and enjoy playing in it, which is amazing. That's what we set out to do.
Yeah. At that point, I'd also like to give some credit to the Angel Wargamers crew, who in 2018 put on a day's worth of gaming using our raw battle plans for us to play in. So Ming, Steve, Mitzy, and I went along and played our battle plans with those guys, and they put some twists in as well. So we didn't know what was going to happen, and that was awesome. We really appreciated that. So
no, that's awesome. And you do see how the fire has spread across the world. Nova, for example, in America. I know Aaron Bossian and all of that crew. They absolutely love their narrative gaming, and you can kind of start to see it kind of really grow. So I guess I want to ask some event organizer questions. I keep saying tournament, it's event. We are talking events here. So Martin Orlando had asked, in advance, he had asked me, how do you create an incentive for more casual event goers to contribute to that narrative experience? So I guess, and this kind of follows along the theme that we're talking about here. Not everybody wants to write a book about their experience. Not everyone wants to dress up in costume, but how can a more casual player get involved in a narrative event and contribute to that story?
I think
Jimbo.
a lot of the things. Yeah, I think a lot of things we've already talked about kind of cover that. To be honest, with Raw, as we said, we're very open on our framework. People can dive in as much or as little as they like. I think one of the tricks we always have is we ask people to custom build their own model to represent something, which we'll make a war scroll for, and they bring it along. And that process of them building that character, they invest into it, and they'll have some attachment to that, which they wouldn't have if they go and buy a standard whatever hero straight from GW and build it. It's not the same. So I think little things like that really help. It's not complicated. You mentioned naming a general. I mean, that's talked about and probably laughed about quite a lot, to be honest, of people saying name a general. It works. It really does. That's how Teyvati started at the end of the day. And look at the monster that's become. So.
But there's so many cool name generators out there now. And is it Jamie the Jasper? I hope I got that right. He's created so many cool name generators. There are name generators in books. I always generate a name, but then I write it down and I document it. So whenever I come back to that hero, for example, in my Cities of Sigma, if I've got a battle mage, right, and there are 8 different varieties of battle mage, when I have a life battle mage, I call it something. If I've got something else, I call it something different, and I try to bring a different model to represent the battle mage because, this generic battle mage shouldn't be jumping between all 8 laws. I should have a name and a story. And that's one thing I really enjoyed about CanCon this year, 2020, was that Clint had based it in Gairan, and it was all about the Jade Kingdom. And despite it being a 6-game match play tournament, I was able to tell a story and actually think about what was my army bringing to the table. And I brought a Hallowheart army, and this was a personal story for me, but it was a Hallowheart army that was going in trying to, almost like a research party, trying to find artifacts of power in Gairan, bring it back to Hallowheart to study. And I could tell an opponent my story, I could write it down as a little document, or it was just something for myself. But either way, when I played the game, I enjoyed it a lot more because not only was I getting a win or a loss, but I was advancing that narrative for myself. And I think I felt more fulfilled as a player than going in and just being dry cut, going for the 5-0 or the 4-1.
I think also from an event organizer's point of view, during the event itself, you've got to be flexible as well. You might have your storyline there, but if players want to do their own thing, that's absolutely fine. And also recognize, and I think we'll probably come on to this later on, but there can be disparities in army strength. And having an understanding of the game, actually how the mechanics of it work, and noticing when there could be potential, I'd say whitewashes is probably a good thing. When someone just steamrollers someone else, not necessarily intentionally, but recognizing that and then be able to give some of those in-game boons or hexes that we mentioned earlier. You talked about the bad moon or something like that. Just being able to understand that. And so I think narrative event organizers need to be really involved and walking around the tables as we do to really understand what's going on and try and help people. I say help people, that's not quite right. Make sure people have the space to be able to do what they want to do.
Yeah,
I think that's really important.
I think to sort of continue that on a little bit, one of the things that we found quite helpful when we ran Legends right at the beginning was that we knew when the players all signed up, we knew that we had some really strong players coming from Angel Wargamers who were through and through RPG players, dungeon masters. They've all had a lot of experience in playing role-playing games and other gaming systems. And we actually identified quite quickly that they were amongst the realms. They were playing as individuals, but amongst the realms, as we were walking around and interacting with the tables, we recognized quite quickly that they were helping tell stories on the tables and the realms that they were in, and they were involving the other players around them because they have that natural ability to tell stories and to role play and interact in that way. So if you're an event organizer, a narrative event organizer, or maybe want to be a narrative event organizer, you don't have to do it alone. You will know people in your community who are really strong role players, who are really strong cosplayers, who are really strong terrain makers, who are really strong whatever. And it's about tapping into those resources, maybe ahead of the event, or saying to them, on day one, before they arrive, I'd really like you to help me just try and achieve this one thing, try and get those 3 players who've never played at a narrative event before to, come on board with you, and maybe ask them to create a little rift or something that, but include those 3 players who are new in that storyline, and drag them in, and I think every wargaming community has those strong leaders, if you like, who you can tap into. You know them in your own gaming community.
Yeah, no, I think it's great advice, and it kind of comes into what Christine Hookinpin had asked me previously. I did ask this to Twitter, and Twitter had given me a whole bunch of really cool questions. But Christine had asked, how do you encourage newer players to a narrative style event? She also asked if you are all doing well, and you're all looking glorious and beautiful. I added that, but
thank you, Christine. Yes, we are all well, all of us. Yeah, absolutely.
But how do you encourage a new player? Like, is it like a refer a friend scheme? Like, come in, or like, how do you unlock someone who hasn't really had much narrative experience, or even because a lot of I know from my community, right, in Sydney, Australia, there is no real space that creates narrative events other than what I do and what kind of the Mortally Wounded crew do. They kind of do this half blended narrative, half match play, this kind of like hybrid game. But I don't know. I don't really know any clubs who are playing narrative. I don't really know anyone who are dropping match play points. It's traditional 2K. I go to my game store. I go to my games club. That's the world that I live in. How do I break some of those shackles, or how do I bring that newer player to kind of dip their toes in that narrative space, as Christine is kind of talking about?
Well, sorry, Mitzy, I'll dive in. Well, we use points for Raw because it makes it easy for people coming to an event to understand the kind of game they're going to have.
So I don't have to throw over points. Like, I don't have to literally go, it's not match play. Not. Throw it out the window.
To be honest, if you're doing a narrative event, I think you still have to use points, because how do you get people to understand what kind of game they're playing? And you can't really do that. If you're doing a one-on-one or down a club or whatever, you can have a chat beforehand with whoever you're playing, with your co-players, and say, right, let's have this kind of a game. You set out the parameters, and then you can bring whatever you like. That's fine. You can't do that at an organised event because the players just can't talk to each other. You can't talk to 40 other players. 39 other players, whatever.
And they've got to bring their whole collection as well, right? Like, they've got to bring 5,000 points just in case.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just logistically a nightmare. So that's where points are really handy. That's where match play, that's the match play element, or part of the match play element we have at Raw, which is fine. But I think to encourage newer players, the biggest thing is enthusiasm. If you show a lot of enthusiasm, if you start showing it off what you're doing, people will join in. And that's what we've done.
I would also suggest that try to, amongst your gaming group, right? So everyone's got a small gaming group. Some people have very large gaming groups, and they play routinely, regularly, obviously outside of these current times. But you tend to find that clubs are omnipresent and people are going there all the time. Try something new. Try saying to everybody there, or to your 3 mates or to your 4 mates, let's do a Tale of 4 Wargamers. Let's all go out, buy a blister pack hero, paint that hero or convert that hero, paint it up, and then do Path to Glory. Step outside of your current hobby setting and go and, with 3 mates, try to create a new army, but try to, pick a clamshell, convert it up, name that hero, and develop a narrative from that point, it becomes it becomes a snowball. Once you start, that snowball starts plummeting downhill real quick. And you could do it over a period of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, whatever, once a month. The guys down at the Dorset Doggers Club, so Paul Buckler, Chris Tomlin, Matt Lyons, and Aaron Bailey. They've done the I can never remember the name of it, but they're Tale of Four Warlords, if you like, or four Wargamers. They've done 2 now, and they've all 4 of them stepped up their hobby game. They've encouraged each other to develop new armies, and they've all got a narrative to them. And it's just can be as simple as that. And once you've got that, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You always want to do it. Once you've done it once, you always want to do it.
I know some really cool ones that I've been inspired by. So Domus over in America, who runs Midwest Meltdown, is now taking over Adepticon as of next year. But one of the cool things for Midwest Meltdown is he's always had this monster of Gur. So that was a last year theme, and everyone got to bring in a free monster. And Domus had set the war scroll, so he made a custom war scroll for that monster of Gur, but let people go to town and go, look, as long as it's base size between X and Y, do what you want. You want to go buy a HeroClix beholder, you want to go use a beholder, cool, go buy something completely outside of Age of Sigmar. You want to run a cockatrice, go run a cockatrice. If you want to kit bash your own thing and bring a Gargan and Gorgon parts and make some type of monster, you do you. And I think that type of concept, and what I'm tapping into for my Allure of the Beastgrave is I'm trying to do that through Anvils of Apotheosis, where I've said, look, guys, day 1 is 1,000 points, day 2 is 1,500 points. I've removed battle line restrictions. So I've said, hey, guys, you don't have to have battle line restrictions, just make your army. And you get 2 heroes for free. They're both worth 20 Anvils points. And in day 2, your general gets supercharged. So he'll go from 20 to 40. So he kind of evolves over the battle. So basically, I'm giving them their general and their 2 IC. I imagine as they go to Beastgrave, they're going to have some type of wizard or general or some type of advisor that supports them. I want them to kind of progress that narrative. And they can either think about what that evolution looks like and model it, or on the day they might go, look, I've had some really cool battles, I want to pick these additional traits because of what I've experienced over day 1.
Yeah, I think just rounding off that question from Christine for me as well is just there is a massive resource out there on the interwebs of people who are in this hobby. There is not one single person that I know of who, if you sent them a DM and said, I'm thinking about doing this, or I'd like to get involved in that, how could I do that? Yeah, I would just say reach out, talk to the people that you see out in the community posting a lot, talk to all the hobbyists out there. It may be you've never done a kit bash before. Talk to Ricky Smith. That man is a genius. Yeah, talk to Steve Foote. These people will never not answer a question, and they are there they're there because that's the world in which they live, but ultimately they're there, they're inspirations. People look at what they churn out and it's like, oh my word, how am I going to achieve that? I'm going to go and buy a Gargan and a land boat or whatever and turn it into something spectacular. That's just come into my head. I think that might have to be something I do. But,
trademark Mitzy.
Yeah. But talk to the community, because there is a vast wealth of knowledge out there, and people are prepared to share their wealth and experience. Not their wealth, their experience and their knowledge. Some of them are prepared to share their wealth as well. I mean, Anthony created his own currency. So
sign me up to this wealth generation.
I was going to ask you what the exchange rate's like for your Sigmar pounds.
No comment. I'll send you some. But one question that Darren Watson had shared, and Darren Watson is a beautifully minded, very competitive focused player. Not that he's restricted in that world, but he is, very much a competitive player. And one thing, he asked a really good question to me, and that was, what are those lessons that can be learnt playing narrative games for a competitive player? So and maybe this is a Jimbo question, being that you are a bit more competitively minded. Not that Mitzy's not a competitive minded player, but Jimbo is certainly more. But Jimbo, from your experience playing narrative, and I guess this might be also the hook to introduce competitive players to narrative players if you're trying to sell it to a community or a games club. Like, what can I learn?
I think it goes back to something we were talking about earlier again, in that you have to have that interaction with your co-player on the other side of the table a lot more. I just think it engenders a much more fun game, whether it's narrative or match play. If you're having a good convo and a good laugh with the person opposite you, whether you're smashing them up in full-on match play environment, table 1, game 5, or if you're having a narrative game and you're both sitting there trying to tell a story, I think that's phenomenal. I mean, at the end of the day, this is something we do for fun. This is not something we all do to make a living out of it, unfortunately, as much as we'd all like to. Some people can, but most of us can't. We do it for fun. It's what we do in our spare time. This is what we enjoy. So let's enjoy it.
It's a hobby.
I was actually speaking to Darren yesterday, following on from his goat-related.
I was going to say all the goats eating his bushes, but no, the grass.
That was one of the funniest days on Twitter, following the feral hogs thing. But it was hilarious. And I was chatting to Darren, and he's always wanted to come to Raw. I've spoken to him many times about it, but he's always felt a little bit, I wouldn't say intimidated, but worried that he wouldn't fit in, given that he's a very strong match play player. He's a very, very good player. And I've always said, come along. It hasn't worked out for one reason or another. But he's looking at Gargants and Gotrek at the moment. He loves his Gotrek, doesn't he? But it's like, I can't bring Gotrek to Raw. And I was like, well, look at Anvil and Apotheosis. Make your own little Watt Trek. Make a Watt Trek. And you can bring
Felix. Make Felix.
Yeah. So and he was like, yeah, that's brilliant. So he's going to go and have a look at that, and hopefully we'll see him at Raw soon. So there's a way for everyone to join in a little bit.
Well, that actually ties me into a question from Ricky Smith, actually. And Ricky had asked, how do you reconcile the fact that for some armies, the most narrative list can occasionally be the most overpowered one? You referred to Eels before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for some narrative games, we have this consensus, or there's this agreement that we're not going to run the most broken match play. I'm not bringing a change host, for example, to a narrative event. How do you manage that as an event organizer to ensure that people are having a good time, but then also to be narrative, and like what's some advice that you would have? Is it the way you communicate with your players, or maybe what you put in a players pack? Do you even tell people like no change host, no 50 salamanders?
No. I think for us it's very simple. Jimbo hates balance. We do not balance games. We will quite often have maybe two players playing against one player. We might have, one player with 1,500 points and two players with, 1,000 points each, so that there's a slight imbalance. There might be restrictions in the battle plan about what you can and can't do. There's a way that a narrative event organizer can write or borrow scenarios from the plethora that are available to basically ensure that games are still enjoyable. You might have 18 eels on the table, but the restrictions in the battle plan may mean that they're not as effective, or you've actually got two armies that you've got to take on. So how are those 18 eels going to deal with two armies? So I think, in short, it's down to, borrowing from the existing community, battle plans, etc., to make sure that ultimately you're challenging the player to play to the scenario and to play to the story and to develop what they're doing, in short. And Jimbo will add to that, because I've not summed that up correctly.
No, I think that's good, but also add on top of it, same as match play. Actually, you've got to trust your players. In match play, you trust your players to play their army rules correctly. I don't know the rules for every single army. If someone does something on the tabletop, I'll go, fine. That's what you're telling me that does. I'll roll with it. That's fine, unless I know something is blatantly not true. This has got a 1-up save that's unrendable for the entire. You trust your players. It's the same with narrative. You trust your players to do stuff, and they'll do it. I think it's pretty obvious to most people, if you turn up with 24 eels and something or other, and a hero to a narrative event, it's not really going to make for fun games for you or whoever you're playing against at the end of the day. Whether it be narrative or not. I mean, chuck a few eels in, fine. You can have powerful units. As I said earlier, there's no problem with having powerful units. That's fine. And again, we talked about earlier about having the event organisers walking around the tables, having a look at what's going on and understanding the game. And there's a lot. I mean, over the years, there's a lot of people using narrative actually as an insult of saying, "Oh, that's really narrative." The idea being is it's rubbish, and the person doing it doesn't know what they're doing. If someone's a narrative player, they're clueless. I think it's quite the opposite. I think you actually have to have a massive, not massive, that's not fair, a good understanding of the game to be able to work out, as I said earlier, where those imbalances lie. And I mentioned the word imbalances there. My dislike of balance, my dislike of true balance. You're never going to balance everything, and what's the fun in that? You know, some armies are stronger than others, and they should be.
And it can also be setting the
right.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's more like setting the scene as an event organizer. It's letting people know that there might be situations where it might be 2-on-1. There might be situations where me, as the event organizer, may intervene. I may do something. I may challenge you. I may tell you to do something. This is not match play. This is not just 1-on-1, 2K versus 2K. It's, set of rules. And it reminds me a lot of my dungeon master, Chris, who, if I build a super tanky Goliath barbarian who's just absolutely strength 20, I've actually, kitted out to the nines, he's not going to run a campaign as they document it in D&D. He might look at the scenario and go, look, well, this character is supercharged. He's going to easily defeat these kobolds. I'm going to buff it up with either more kobolds. I'm going to make them have a kobold hero in there. He's going to try to find a way to intervene so that it's still a challenge for that opponent, for me. So I guess, again, this kind of comes back to your divine intervention, your creativity, maybe the restrictions, whether, as you guys mentioned, a lot more terrain on the table, whether it is going to be a couple of extra rerolls or a debuff. Obviously, you're not out there kind of harassing this one player, but there are ways that you can create a cool, interesting narrative. Or you might say to them, look, there's a chance that some of these reinforcements aren't going to arrive, whatever it might be.
Yeah. I mean, we've never had to have a word with any player at Raw, if I'm honest. Some people bring stronger armies than others, and that's fine, and we roll with it. So that which is fantastic for us. But if we had to, we would speak to someone if we had to.
Jonathan B raised a really good question as well. He said, with the stories generated from the battles and events that have happened, do you write up some form of mini novel at the end to give all the players?
So we've got I'd say there's two kind of elements to this. The first two Raws, we asked our players before the event to actually send in their backstories to their armies. It wasn't mandatory. There wasn't any benefit for them, but most people did, and we actually bound them into a book and printed that out and gave that to the players at the start of every event. And I think they're both online somewhere as well, actually.
Yeah, I remember seeing it somewhere.
Yeah, which I thought was really nice. It's quite a lot of work, so we haven't done it for the last couple, if I'm honest. But the other thing is we have had players that have written their own novels, and I'm referring to Dan Somerville, who wrote up his Erinost background into an actual printed. I mean, and then he gave it.
I remember seeing it like it was a literally published book.
Yeah, he bought them to hand them out to every player at the event.
Yeah, gave them free to every player. I think he posted them around the world as well to people.
Yeah, I saw him posting around the world, and I'm like, what?
That's amazing, and it's a really good read, and it is again, it is the story of his battles at Raw. And I'm reading through it going, I remember watching him do that and rolling those dice. That's really weird. But,
again, that's the extremes. That's the extremes that we have that we have found players at Raw go to. Yeah. So in year 1, please send us the backstory behind your army. In year 4, we have players writing novels about their army and the battles that they've had at Raw. And so I suppose that is, but that isn't, again, that is not something that every person who goes to a narrative event is expected to do. It's up to the individual to take on as much or as little of it as they want and participate as much or as little as they want. But generally, as I said earlier, we find people come nervously to the event and blossom into, storytelling genii that are fully invested, fully involved, and have signed up the second tickets go on sale for the next one. And they then have an idea and a realization as to what they're going to do. And they pre-plan their army for the following year and stuff like that.
It's creating the space. I think as an event organizer, and again, I keep coming back to, maybe some of the lessons that an event organizer should be considering is, how do I create the space to allow a player to tell a story? How do I create the space that when a player meets a new player for the first time, it's not a battle, but rather a cooperative story between two players? And how can they almost dance? It's almost like a Warhammer dance as opposed to an arm wrestle. And how do you foster that through collaboration? The question that Chuck Moore kind of shared with me, which was, how do you plan out ways to engage your players and the narrative itself? Like, how do you drop those seeds? How do you progress story? How do you kind of almost, I don't want to say force things, but, are there ways you can kind of pre-plan or create players to form, progress, develop the narrative or the event narrative?
I think for us, it's the advertising we do before each event, which again, we're very lucky to have Steve on board in that he can produce those videos you saw earlier, but also the posters that you put up, just absolutely phenomenal. And we just batter Twitter. Frankly, it's Twitter, chuck loads of stuff out there. One thing I thought worked really well actually was, again, for Aethemy. You may have seen it on some of the pictures earlier. The background there's kind of like brownie kind of coloured posters, and they were custom designed and written posters. After people have sent in these ones here. After people have sent in a little background on their army, again, it was only like a couple of lines, and we just turned them into posters. Again, all in a bit of tongue in cheek. So Gloamfall I think is.
John Green.
It's John Green's. Yeah, John Green's army. It's based on him. I talked about the Eldarian earlier. That's there. And again, going back to Leviathans, you can just see Steve's just done a bit of photoshopping, and we did that as
movie posters. Yeah,
we did it as a movie. So it was all sold as a movie just for giggles. So it's just the way we just try to promote it. That works really well. Again, the kind of level we go to is pretty high on that, but just enthusiasm. It goes back to enthusiasm. I think if you're enthusiastic about something and just keep going on about it, people will join in, and you will have some people that turn up and they don't get it, they don't enjoy it. Fine, they've given it a go. You can't complain at that. If it's not for them, perfectly fine. But the vast majority of people will roll with what you do, and they're up for it. I mean, we have every year we've had match play testers come along, and they come back every year. So it's not an exclusive, I'm narrative, I'm match played. It's not. It goes back to that triangle I was talking about earlier. You can play in any part of that triangle.
It's a Venn diagram. Everyone's got a little center, and sometimes it's just fire. Ricky Smith has summarized it here perfectly, saying you are facilitating hobby greatness. You're not expecting. It's not expected, but inspired. And I think it's those little moments of inspiration, whether it's in your marketing, where it's like, oh, Aethemy. Oh, what does my Aethemist look like? And creating a space there. But if I don't have an idea yet, I get in there and I start mixing up concoctions, and things blow up. And we saw somebody dress up like a potato, or what does my potato look like? Or there's just some crazy interesting things you could really take that to another level by mixing up. I remember those little kids lollies back in the 90s where you mix up these little different jellies and it makes a little candy. But there's so many crazy cool things you can do. And I think cog forts, which you guys have coming up, you don't actually build a cog fort at home. You actually build it on the day, which I think is crazy cool.
That's been the hardest thing to get across to players. Once we announced it, they're like, I'm going to go and build my cog fort. It's like, no!
bring your own bits, but like you're going to build it on the day.
Yeah, and you don't know what you're going to build, and we don't know what you're going to build because it depends what you find. Because the battle plans and
The
outside of the
resources.
actual game itself, they'll have an effect on what kind of bits you find, and we'll have all those bits there you can use. If you want to bring your own, that's fine. You can then substitute that for the bits you get, but you're not going to be able to go, I'm going to bring 15 guns and slap them all onto my cog 4, because you might not find
they
15
just won't be
guns.
guns. There'll be pieces of metal.
Yeah, there'll be whether it's a bit of armor or a bit of an engine or whatever it is. So, yeah, the enthusiasm for that has been quite good fun. And
actually, that I think, you know, we've seen from the launch of Raw 16 Legends each year, the sort of the buzz around the event has grown and gathered, and momentum's grown and gathered, and players who previously been want to come back, and that then's an interesting thing for us as event organisers. It's like, how big can we let the event go before it becomes too hard to keep it raw? Yeah, you know, Ben Johnson's always said to us, you need 100 player, 100. You could do 100 player. You could fill Warhammer World. You could do 100 player Raw, and he's probably right. We could ultimately, but it's how we maintain that raw feel, and that it's very difficult to let something become so big that it doesn't feel like it should be at its core. And we want to very much hang on to Raw and how it feels for the players and the immersion for the players. And ultimately, there's 4 of us. We can't spread ourselves that thin. We'll try, you know, because the Raw 20 was going to be our biggest event yet. We had 60 players booked up. And you know, unfortunately, we've postponed it till next year. And those 60 players hopefully will be there next year, and we'll crack on. But you know, it's about making sure we can control it, and it kind of comes on to the question that Al's asked in the feed there. How do you keep one person or team from running away with the story? It's about having that control for the 4 of us, and about being able to steer players. And the great example to answer that question was the Twitter poll last year. You know, yes, Dracothfoot and Brightmane were out there campaigning because it was a political narrative, and we were on Twitter all the time, live updates to the Twitter sphere, and trying to get the outside community to influence the story and the what was going on, but also the players in the room doing their dirty deals and their you know, intermingling to try and again, Daniel Somerville became Dracothfoot campaign manager, and he was basically trying to poison everyone. It's about sort of recognizing that maybe one faction swinging a little bit too far towards outright victory, and then throwing in Gork and Mork have said no. Sorry, pals, but all the destruction players in the room on this faction are going to get a boon, and let's see if we can, you know, push back against that a little bit. So yeah, it's about having an omnipresence in the room and seeing what's going on each table. And we do spend an awful lot of time as event organisers just amongst the players, and just seeing what's happening and hearing what's going on. And the players themselves become beacons for it. You'll see them coming to us saying, "This has just happened. We need to, you know, particularly last year, we need to try and do this." And so, yeah, Steve and myself were giving players specific side missions outside of the main storyline, if you like, to try and go and influence things. And it's just having the trust in the players to come to you and say, we're getting an absolute hammering here, guys. What are we going to do about it? You can then deal with it. You can inspire greatness on the table.
It makes it sound like a narrative event organizer is a player, but the game is the event, and you are playing the event, and it's you surveying the tabletops, and then looking at ways that you can manipulate it accordingly to progress the narrative, to change the narrative, to alter someone's storyline, to create storylines, to create people's own little hooks that might, almost like you're dropping seeds all over the place, and that they'll grow. By the way, you might want to kick out one of your players coming, Charles Nolan, who is telling me he's going to be bringing black market wheels for Cogfort. So watch out for this black market wheel and dealer with his dodgy wheels.
They're pram wheels, right, Charles?
Carrying on a couple of things on there. First of all, actually, Ben Johnson said we're never going to get 100 players to a narrative event. It will never happen. My intention is to prove him wrong.
Yeah.
I'm sure he'll be sorely disappointed. He'll be like, "Oh, you got me."
Yeah, I think we can do it. We build on every year, but also I think it's important to recognise that we don't get everything right. We haven't always nailed everything at all. We make mistakes, and we've learned from them. I think particularly if we look at the first draw, we made a lot of mistakes in that one that a lot of people didn't like, and we had actually probably about half the people never came back again. So it wasn't for them. A lot of them match play players that want to play tournaments. They just they were just seeing what it was, which is fine. We make mistakes every year. We try and learn from them and make sure we can improve.
Like we said last time, ultimately, last time, like we were talking about it yesterday, but like we said earlier, after every event, we always push back to the players for feedback, and without shadow of a doubt, the players always come back with really good suggestions, and we try really hard to take those suggestions on board and improve what we're doing. It's really important, I think, as an event organizer to learn at every event. And like we said, we learn from going to other people's events. We learn from feedback from the players that attend our events, and we learn through asking the community for advice and how we could better things. So I think ultimately that's it. It doesn't matter what you do in life, you're always learning, right? So there's no reason why you're not at an Age of Sigmar event.
Yeah. One thing I've always loved as well. I just want to give another shout out to a different narrative event organizer, and that is Alex from the Animosity crew. Where looking at ways that he's incorporated Discord and communication, and faction communication and secrecy, and as an event organizer, I can use that to sneakily kind of communicate or provide benefits or intel to the narrative, and manipulate the game without actually having to physically talk to all my teams or creating the space for them to kind of plan things for their next strategic move. I think, again, there's another cool way you can again bring this story to life. Sorry, Jimbo, what were you going to say?
That's a great question. What was I going to say? It's about the feedback, actually. I'm just going to say a bit of detail on how we just sent out a Survey Monkey, actually, and there's only 3 questions on it. And it's what do you enjoy about the event? What do you not enjoy about the event? And what would you add to improve it? So we keep it really, really simple.
Yeah,
and as Mitzy
we
said,
use net promoter metric, don't we?
As Mitzy said, the feedback we get is really, really helpful. The only time it's not helpful, we have had this a few times, is we get some people saying, this thing was brilliant, if you don't include this, I'm never coming again. And other people saying, this thing was awful, if you include it again, I'm never coming again. Which is like, someone's not going to be happy, but I can't do anything about it.
You must be talking about triumph and treachery.
No, that was actually the skirmish, I remember.
Oh, yeah, skirmish. That's right.
Skirmish.
Yeah.
Talk to me about logistics, because one of the things as an event organizer, if I'm not going to be matching people up by wins and losses and kill points and objective points or tournament points, whatever it might be, how on earth do you match up players? Like, is there a rough formula or a strategy, or at least even some thinking on how you get players to fight each other?
This has probably been our biggest problem that we've found real difficulty with is how we do that. And I think probably last year was the first time we'd actually got a handle on a way that works for us. Previously we tried Swift style, that didn't really work. We've tried just saying to the players, go and find a table, that didn't really work. Because sometimes people find it difficult to walk up to a table with someone already there they don't know, which is understandable. But last year, because we had these 2 factions and everyone was in one or the other, Mitzy or Steve, Brightmane or Dracofoot actually appointed people who said, right, you go to this table here and your job is to do this, this and this. You go to this table here. But some players wanted to, they requested specific tables they wanted to play on. Some people wanted to stay on the same table for the entire event because they wanted to defend that table because that was their territory. Fine, knock yourself out, that's great.
And some people had their pre-arranged grudges. So it was like, well, can we start the weekend playing each other? And then, first game in, we want to play each other because that's going to inspire what happens for us for the rest of the weekend. And then ultimately we get, that guy over there has just slaughtered the Bone Splitters army. I'm an ogre player. I really want to go and sort them out. So we kind of, and that then also throws spanners in works because we're like, well, yeah, we've got this fixed. Right, I need you to do this. I need you to do that. I need you to do this. But then it's like, oh, but I've just played him. I know you've just played him, but I need you to go and sort this out for me. So, it does create its own little mini beast. But yeah, as Jimbo said, year one, we were like, choose a table, choose an opponent, off you go. And people were like, what? What?
If you didn't have the politicians, or if you did, because obviously you have 4 people in your team, and for someone like me, for example, I'm a one-man band right now. What advice would you give me when it comes to the matchup process if I don't have these factions, or if I create my own factions, they are player-only factions? Like how on earth would I do the matchups? Is it like is it a free for all, or
you could just randomize? So you can get just use a randomizer on a interwebs or spreadsheet or something like that. It might work. It's a tricky one. I have to say, it's a tricky one.
Look at the objectives of the scenario and look at the player base you've got and the army factions that you've got. So, for example, I don't know, if it's something where someone's got to get somewhere real quick, then you might want to use, Stormcast with the big fast chicken riders. I can't remember what they're called.
Paladors, Vanguard Paladors.
Yes, Paladors, and ride the winds etheric. I guess. Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's exactly what Steve and I were employing last year. So it's like, okay, I know I've got a Vanguard army, and I know he's got loads of Paladors, and I know we want to get somewhere quick and secure something and hold it for the game. Right, you have to go to that table, and you have to secure that objective for me. I think objectives are your friend in this kind of environment because again, we had 3 resources. So, and each of the resources, depending on which faction held which resource, meant a different thing. So if we had all the food, the opposite faction were starving. So in every hero phase, they had to roll a dice for every unit. If they rolled a 1, they took mortal wounds because the unit was starving. If we had all the wealth, we had better equipment or whatever it was. So, you can tailor, I guess, the battle plans to help you kind of sort the players, because you can then see when players arrive, you know what they've got, they're on opposing teams or they're fighting for something. Yeah, use that metric to try and pair people up.
I know.
It doesn't always work. And they're not always necessarily going to get the right matchup. But again, it's then about having the trust in the players to make the game.
I know Al in the chat has mentioned, colored balls from a bag might be a way. I know either way I'm currently thinking about it. So I mentioned, the Beastgrave, my Allure of the Beastgrave event is primarily Order versus Chaos. Order want to defend the Beastgrave, Chaos want to take over the Beastgrave. Destruction and Death are essentially neutral. So I'm going to let them choose which side they're going to be on, and I'm going to let them have opportunities to backstab and kind of switch teams during the game. But using like event software, for example, like tournament software, you can create teams where basically you can avoid them playing their own club mates so they don't game the system. And I'm wondering if I create like an Order team, a Chaos team, and then if I can get the tournament software to not match up Order versus Order, Chaos versus Chaos, but kind of mix them around. I'm wondering if I can do that, at least manipulate Destruction and Death. And I think some of the randomness is cool. I like the idea of letting people, so I think that's the challenge, right? Match play has structure, and you tell me I'm on table 5, I'm up against this army, I know it's 2K, we just put our toys down, we roll dice. But in this narrative, it's almost like, well, I've got to, how do I do the matchups? How do I create a story? How do I have this conversation? And I think obviously that creates opportunity, but also it also can be confusing. So I guess if nothing more, think about how you might want to do it. Is it random? Is it choose your own adventure? Is it the team if you lose, you get to choose? I know Holy Havoc, Steve Herner, for example, has a rule where how they choose their tables, because each of their tables is set in a realm and there's special benefits. And I think the person who loses in the last round gets to go sit on a table, and then the winners of the last game then go find the table that they want to fight against. So the loser kind of gets to dictate the terms of battle. If I remember Steve correct, maybe I'm making that up, but I think that was kind of roughly how he does that.
Yeah, but that involves some kind of scoring metric at that point. And then going back to what we were talking about an hour ago, we don't tell people what our scoring metric is. So we keep that hidden. So it's quite, we have done Swift style before. It just, I'll be honest, it didn't work very well for us. You might find it does work for you.
I guess it's something to think about. And I guess I'm calling this out because not everyone has a 4-person team. But it's something that you probably want to think about on whether it's going to be random, whether you are going to use win-loss, whether you are going to create some whole different objective, or you're going to create something secret. However you might want to do it, you may want to do it so you don't have complete bedlam at your event, and then you're spending half an hour trying to work out how you do the matchups.
Yeah,
sorry, Mitzy.
I was going to say, and actually just picking up on what Charles has just said in the chat, that ultimately because of the way we do Raw, and because each game is always a different army size, you're not playing the same list if you end up playing the same person, and also the scenarios are so wild and wacky that ultimately it's going to skew again the game, and it's going to be a completely different game. So I think that ultimately, occasionally we do have players who play the same person twice over the weekend, but it's never a problem. The scenario and the opponents, the co-players, sort it out between them, and ultimately the overarching story always has a slant on what we want the outcome to be. So, or indeed what the outcome's going to ultimately be. So I think they're both co-players are playing towards that, and they play it in the spirit of the event. So it's never a real issue.
Another way you could do it, just thinking, this is off the top of my head, Anthony, you could have one side of the table A and one side B, for example, and then at the end of each game you say, right, every player A goes 2 tables to the left, every player B goes 4 tables to the right, and then just mix it up each time. Again, you wouldn't then play the players that are next to you, but that could work quite well if you're next to the people in your order faction, for example.
Yeah. And look, I guess, again, the point is just think this through, because, again, if I run a traditional match play tournament, I use Best Coast pairings, I use down under pairings, I use some type of tournament software, and that determines how the rounds are set up. But as a narrative event organizer, how do I do it?
Yeah.
And there is no, and I think if this 2 hours so far has proven anything, it's that there is no one silver bullet to any of the answers that you have. This is a sandbox. You do what you want to do. If you want to create a fully customized, narrative-driven, choose your own adventure where each faction does something, and depending on what happens with the faction, the story and the battle plan, you might have 50 battle plans, and depending on the outcomes of each round, actually might determine the next set of battle rep plans. Or it could be something simple as just a little narrative flair to a match play to a system where you've got, maybe you have no battle line, maybe you bring some old Warhammer Fantasy battle rules where 50% of your army can be heroes, 25%, whatever you want. Do whatever you want. I think either way, it's your sandbox. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, I think ultimately I would say to anyone who's narrative curious, build it and they will come. To use that old film quote, build it and they'll come. That's what we did. We put on an event that we would want to go to as players, and no one's gonna put you down for that. Ultimately, as an event organizer, it's your event. You do what you want. The players will embrace it or not embrace it. If they don't embrace it, they won't come next year. But other people will. So I think do what you want to do. Give people the opportunity to play in a different environment that they would normally play in. Step outside of the regulated match play form of AOS. I mean, personally, when I play match play, I still like to play on a table that is full of terrain. I think terrain has a massive impact on the game of Age of Sigmar, and I think terrain is still underused at match play events. I would happily play on the raw tables at a match play event because I think it just adds to the excitement of playing the game. Personally, who doesn't want to play over floating islands around a city of Mitzmanheim? Who doesn't want to play in a desert that's got shifting sand dunes? That's what the world of Age of Sigmar is all about, as far as I'm concerned.
I think one thing that's very cool as well is I've seen a lot of internet battle tomes. People like Ricky Smith, for example, made his World Titans battle tome for his Gargans, but he's also made a Midnight City for his Cities of Sigmar, but his own version. You got the likes of Tyler Mengel, who wrote his own Age of Sigmar Tomb Kings battle tome. We're seeing more of those types of custom war scrolls, custom rule sets, and these people aren't making them because they want some busted, overpowered unit or army, but it's their way to tell their story through war scrolls. And I think, again, that also is a cool opportunity to go, look, I want to run a Necrosphinx. I've got this crazy idea of want to do X. Can I bring this to life at your event? And even just a little floating islands, again, Dark Fantastic Mills, for example, does sell them, and you could make them through foam or whatever it is. But how often do you play Age of Sigmar in 3D? Like actually having floating islands that you can put models on, and all of a sudden you're now playing on the battlefield. I think Nova had a ship battle, like literally on sea, having ship battles. You could have a sky battle. There's new rules around fighting in the sky, but the world is your oyster. Like you could do so many cool, crazy stuff, and you're right. If you build it, people will come.
We're also very blessed that we have Bishmeister, who is an amazing, incredible terrain manufacturer extraordinaire, who brings a new something for us every year to feature at Raw. And last year, having his Mercia Miniatures harbour that he created was just amazing. And people, it just, to me, adds so much to the game of Age of Sigmar that you could do nothing else other than build terrain. And Jimbo and I have spent many hours building terrain for Raw, but it really does enrich the game. And I would say, if you do nothing else, take a look at what you normally play on week in, week out, and add something to it. Every month, pledge to yourself, make a new piece of terrain for your personal collection, so that when you do play your mates, that you've got a really spectacular table or a different table to play on.
You can see in the corner, like you can see on the screen here as well, and I hope you don't get insulted here, but a couple of those pieces of terrain look really cheap, and you can just go buy blue foam, pink foam, whatever country color foam it is. But those yellow circles, they just look like foam you've cut with a knife, you've cut with a hot wire cutter. That cents on the dollars there, and it just changes the dynamic completely on the table. So I think, again, if I'm a narrative event organizer, I'm thinking about terrain. I'm thinking about, how do I tell the story? How do I create and force different interactions? And I love the example that you used previously, that the tables aren't 6x4. If you've got a couple of connecting battle mats and they're all similar themed, you could have literally 5 tables in a row, and that is one realm, that is one table. And yes, I might play in a proportion of that table, but it doesn't mean I can't interact in others. And I think that's pretty cool. Who's to say that my wizard wagon doesn't go shoot completely and go help my ally, or go do something because I feel like it, or whatever it might be?
Definitely. Yeah, why wouldn't they? And you can see that, I think, in the bottom right-hand picture with that's Shaiish. You can see the sand dunes, and it leads on to the graveyard, and it's all one area.
Yeah,
and that's only half the table. There's another 2 bits behind that.
2 tables the other side. Yeah, absolutely. I think, just a word of warning: we have about 40 boxes of terrain in my warehouse here, as well as our own personal collection of terrain that we have at each other's houses. So it does, because we like to put on a new, we like to constantly make terrain so that every year the tables are evolving. We have an awful lot of terrain kicking around.
I have 2 3D printers working 24/7. I have a lot of terrain.
Exactly. So just bear that in mind. You do have to store it somewhere.
You have to store it somewhere. You have to create it. But, take the lessons from Australia. I know one thing that I'm very proud of is that we've created a culture where all players are to contribute 3 pieces of terrain to the event. So they'll come in and they'll lend it. They'll drop it here. And it does alleviate some of the resource responsibility from an event organizer, especially if you're growing and you're new to the hobby or you're new to event running. Getting people to contribute, asking people to contribute. Maybe you give them a boon, maybe you give them a benefit by contributing and helping. Think about, really, I think you guys have mentioned it as well. Steve is wonderful at, graphic design. Lean in on other people and create a team. Even if it's not a formal team, I'm sure there are players out there who are willing to lend a hand in their expertise, whether it's marketing, whether it's, graphic design. You might have some people who have connections at printers and they could print off some flyers or some things at no cost. You might have builders who have cheap foam or extracted foam they usually throw away that could give you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, you mentioned him before, Dark Fantastic Mills. He's supported us pretty much since Raw, the original Raw, for 5 years. I think, the floating island there, that's one of his very early tree prototypes on top of the island that he printed for us. He did the Raw Nado for Aethamy. He's done our medals for us. That's just an in-game thing that we used at Aethamy.
Endless spell, that was
3D. Sorry,
it's an endless spell.
And it's an endless spell. Yeah, absolutely. But again, use the resources that you have available to you. And there are people out there with mad skills. I mean, as you say, you're constantly 3D printing. There's so much stuff out there in Thingiverse that you can use if you know someone who can 3D print.
I've mentioned in this episode a few times now, and I wish I had them here, is that I've literally printed coins, and it'll cost me at the end of it all probably $20 or less to print probably like 500 coins that I'll want to use during the event. But that file came from a free website, and it was just a matter of printing materials, and it's not very expensive. And if you know someone with a 3D printer, I'm sure they'd throw you a favor. That's I think the thing here is thinking outside the box, and I think if nothing more over these last 2 hours or so, I hope there's a few ideas that have been sparked to go, how do I think differently? How do I create an event that is narrative driven and is going to be a little bit different from match play? Again, match play is not bad, but it's breaking away from the framework and tapping into that sandbox that you guys have spoken about already to create a battle or create a system that isn't based purely on wins and loss and kill points, but rather a story hook, whether it's your story hook or a personal story. And one of the things that I'm doing at my event, Allure of the Beastgrave, is I'm asking my players to submit a couple of personal objectives. And I'm not going to track it. I'm not going to tell them it's not good or it's too good, but I want them to think about their army and say, right, if we're going for the Beastgrave, if we're going into Gur and doing something with the Beastgrave, what am I doing? And hopefully I can look at all of those objectives and go, right, well, maybe I'll use that for my pair ups. Maybe I'll look for ways that I can interact with them. And the more that they give me, the more I can work with over the weekend. And, if someone's trying to get favor with Nagash because, the death magic is seeping in and they want to really open that up. So, Nagash gets superpowers from the Beastgrave, and we unlock some undead demigod beast that's sitting under Beastgrave. Okay, that's something that I can work with as an event organizer. I'm now going to try to find hooks, and I'll probably interact with that table more, because they've given me as the game master something to work with. So if I can encourage that, that's how I can give as much as what I can to their story.
That sounds awesome.
Absolutely.
No.
Definitely.
The last question. Oh, Jimbo, go on. Sorry.
I was going to jump back very quickly on something you mentioned earlier about custom war scrolls, and we do get asked if people can write their own war scrolls and bring them. Which yes, they can. My advice to anyone doing that, because again we use points. Obviously, a custom war scroll doesn't have its own points. There is Anvil of Apotheosis for heroes now, which you can use. But if you are writing your own, I would strongly suggest making sure they are either overpointed or underpowered, because it's not much fun for anyone if you bring along a custom unit that no one's ever seen before that absolutely wrecks face. And a particular problem actually I've seen is with buff units. So a unit that buffs other units. You think it's going to be a little effect, and it actually multiplies out quite a lot, and they can be a lot more powerful than they appear on paper in the game. So yeah, my general advice on that to anyone thinking about doing it: if you want to do it, that's great. I love it. It's cool, but always err on the side of caution and make sure you're the one taking the hit rather than someone else.
Yeah, that's good advice. That is good advice. I think everyone comes in with the intention of having something narrative. I don't think people are sitting there going, "How do I make this busted?" No. But without play testing, without actually really thinking through what it can do, it can create a negative experience. And I think look for ways to weaken. Like if it's really strong in combat, cool. Maybe give it less wounds or less defense because it's very offensive, right? Like look for ways that you can create a weakness, not just all benefits.
Definitely.
I've asked you guys a lot of questions, and I could keep going. I think based on Twitter alone, I think we could easily have like a 5-hour conversation. This is I don't mind. I don't mind, but I am conscious of everyone's time and making sure everyone kind of who listens to this gets the value that they want. So probably the last questions I have is specifically maybe two final questions. One from Twitter, one from myself. So the last question from Twitter is from Kerr Niggett. I'm assuming it's Monty Python. If not, it is Monty Python. I don't care. Kerr Niggett. And the question is, what is the craziest narrative event or game do you wish that you could run?
So I'll take that one, first of all. I'd love to do something in a massive themed warehouse where it's got rooms in it that each of the rooms is themed to the realm. So it's not just the table, everything around you is also the realm as well. Each of the doors you go through to a different one is a realm gate. That would be really cool. I'm thinking something like the Crystal Maze. I don't know if you had that in Australia, you probably did, but something like that I think would be amazing. And also loads of NPC actors in as well. So like, if you're running an Iron Jaws army and you go, right, okay, I'm going to charge my brutes into that unit there. You roll the dice and then have like 5 or 6 people dressed up as Oryx just legging it past you screaming "Wah." I think that'd be amazing.
That's generally me at Raw, right?
I love it. Hide actors. I think that's beautiful.
Yeah. Like almost like secret cinema. I don't know whether you have that in Australia, where it's basically so they sell tickets to, it could be Blade Runner, and you basically turn up to watch Blade Runner, but every single person that goes dresses as a character or themes themselves to the Blade Runner environment, and when you arrive, you literally walk onto a movie set. So they have loads of actors, actresses there who are all interacting with you in the Blade Runner environment. And then at the end of the evening, you have meals, drinks, what have you. You sit down and watch the film. It's an incredible experience. I've not done it yet, but I've seen a lot of people. I know a lot of people who go. And you just immerse yourself fully in the world. So I'm with Jimbo there. One day, Raw will be a fully immersive, Raw-a-thon or something. But yeah, no, I think ultimately, to answer the question, Raw is the event that we want to run, and I'm really excited about Cogforts because I think people are going to get a real kick out of turning up and having the games influence what they ultimately create and take away with them at the end of the weekend. I think
nuts. It's
going to be nuts. Yeah.
Logistically, it's not. Sorry, I say logistically, it's a nightmare for us, but hey ho, it'll be fun.
And the cool thing as well, like when I read through the, and by the way, if anyone's interested in what Team Rawsome have created, in the description below, I have links to 4 of the players packs. So I think the last 4 players packs are in the links already. There's also a link to a amazing narrative website called We Are the Neo, or the We Are the Neon, which is the narrative event organizer network, run by a whole bunch of legends, but they have been able to capture and distill some of the best practice out there, give you resources, tips, techniques. Very, very, very cool resource. I'd highly recommend it. I've also got the link to my players pack, my latest Beastgrave players pack, if you kind of want to see the direction that I'm going with. But I love the idea of creating immersion and thinking about ways you can incorporate music and lighting as well. And I don't know how you can use that to set the scene without it being a distraction, but I think the theatrics, bringing that in, could be very, very cool. Having little, like, maybe in between battle rounds, you have little play clips of, a battle or a progression or some type of, you tell the story arc through that little video, and then it's like, cool, what does your character do? How do you disseminate that information? And then what's your next play? I don't know. Very cinematic. I think we'll have to jack up the prices a little bit to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Totally get that. Making an event as immersive as you possibly can is, for me, the direction that we want Raw to always be heading in. Being able to just walk into a room for 2 days with 40, 50, 60 other people and just spend the weekend totally, brain is switched off from the outside world. You are 100% focused on the character that you're portraying in your army and assisting the other characters in the room in guiding the story towards a goal. That's where Raw lies for us, and I think that's where it will always head.
Simple things like adding music actually while the event is on, while people are playing the games, is actually really good. The boys won't let me put Avril Lavigne on, unfortunately, which I would listen to relentlessly. It's a simple thing. I mean, we often play the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
I was going to say the Lord of the Rings soundtrack.
It's an easy one, easy win. You just put it over the top, and it's themey, it's exciting, it's scary, it's dirty, it's something uplifting, So
Dungeons and Dragons has a really cool whole set of music as well. And if you look at Dungeons and Dragons and you're thinking about how do I create music or bring music to the fold, there are so many cool music clips, either long and short, to create battle scenes, to have the tavern music, to have walking through the wilderness or the forest. And if that's something that you're interested in, you can create the immersion through existing assets. If you think outside of the box of Age of Sigmar, what's happening in 40k, what's happening in Dungeons and Dragons, what's happening in Magic the Gathering, what's happening in the LARPing and cosplay community. For anyone who follows me on Twitter, you'll know that, I have a Moonclan sickle, for example. I have Galmoraz. There is a whole bunch of Age of Sigmar weapons that are available for cosplay and 3D printing, right? So how can I use that in my tournament? Is it a quest for Galmoraz, and at the end you award the winner Galmoraz?
Brilliant idea. Love it.
Like, who's the next Celestant Prime, or who's going to be who's the next Mortarch? Maybe the next campaign is about a Mortarch. I think there's so many stories now, trying to find Tyrion, or the Deepkin stole somebody and when we're trying to deal with the Deepkin, or there's a million stories you can tap into.
Absolutely.
Don't disagree. And we talked about it right at the start. Phil Kelly's and his team, the lore they're putting out, not just the writing, but the maps. And I'd like to see more maps. I think we could do them. I'd like to see things. I thought Firestorm was really, really good. It was a great little supplement. Obviously, it wasn't around for too long. But that was one of the first things that actually gave us somewhere in the Mortal Realms to work with. I thought it was fantastic. I'd love to see more stuff like Firestorm.
Yeah, and go back and check out the Malign Portents short stories as well. That's so cool. They are full of rich pickings. I know everyone joked about the fact that where's the farmers in Age of Sigmar? Where are the real people? Well, those short stories were the first sort of inkling into those perspectives. They're incredible, and Jimbo and I were fortunate enough to, or unfortunate enough to have bought tickets to go back to Adepticon this year, and obviously didn't go. But part of the preview show, GW, they actually sent out the packs to everyone that had tickets for the preview show, and in there is actually a book version of all of the Malign Portent stories, which is awesome. So yeah, but you can still find them online. So go and check them out, and they're awesome. Really awesome.
There is a surprising amount of resources available, and even if I was just starting my journey, right, like for me to learn Beastgrave, right, I went on and used one of my Audible credits to download the Beastgrave audio drama, which is awesome. I could learn so much. I've got 2+ Tough, I've got Cinder 4 Gaming, I've got so many people out there who are currently producing lore videos, so it's easy for me to understand the lore. I've got maps. I've got the Firestorm hexagon kind of, map setup where I could create my own. Truly, guys, I hope after this last almost 2.5 hours, you are inspired and you have 1, 2, 3 different ideas to either start your event. Maybe if you play or create events at a local game store, you bring a narrative touch, or maybe once a quarter you run more of a narrative style event as opposed to just traditional 2K. It's always good to break it up as well. I think we kind of get tired of the same format every time. And you can kind of test the waters there, but there's just so much out there. And I think I don't think we talk too much about match play, but I think there is opportunity to explore narrative, and I think you both have given us some really good examples of where to start and how to take my event to that next level.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
I did say I had 2 questions, and I've got one final question to take us home, and then we do the shout outs. What advice would you give somebody considering running a narrative event? What's the final words of wisdom after all of this wonderful discussion? But what's your final piece of advice?
I'd say start small, keep it manageable. Narrative events are more work than match play events. That's just the way it is. Beforehand and during. I think not all players want to read tons of blurb. We like to produce stuff like that, but not everyone wants to read it. So don't be offended if some people don't like some of the stuff you do. That's just life. Play test whatever you produce. You could use match play or narrative battle plans produced by GW if you want to. That's absolutely fine. If you want to do your own, I would thoroughly recommend play testing them. That was a mistake we made. We didn't do enough play testing originally. We do now. And going back, we said earlier, ask for feedback. If you ask your players what they enjoyed, what they didn't enjoy, and say, ask them for help, and they will. They really will. Everyone out there will help you.
Yeah, and along the playtesting thing, I'd wholeheartedly advise that. A, because it gives you the opportunity to play through what you've created, but B, you don't have to do that if you don't have the time to do that. For the Aethemy deck, for that, we actually went overseas and we asked a lot of the guys on the Neon network to play test that, because they weren't going to be coming to the event. It wasn't, they signed their NDAs so that they didn't release anything, and we took their ounce of blood. But yeah, we put it out there. Ask the community for help. Yeah, put it out there. They're not coming. Ask them to play through it. Give you constructive criticism and feedback, and then that gives you the ability to go into the event with confidence, knowing that you're not going to fall down at the first hurdle with the first battle plan being very skewed in one direction. So yeah, 100% playtest stuff.
I just had one final thought, that a resource that I probably should have linked below, and I probably will link later, but there is a Facebook group as well called AOS Neon. So AOS space NEON, Narrative Event Organizer Network. And it is people like Mitzy, Jimbo, like Alex, like Nuno, like Aaron, like all the people who are running events and are doing it. Bill is another one. It's a very wonderful resource to sense check, get ideas, borrow ideas, get inspiration for a narrative event. And I'm sure they would welcome you if you want to jump onto AOS Neon. But also there's a whole bunch of links. As I mentioned, We Are the Neo is another one that's I've already linked in the show. So I hope people are inspired to either attend an event, to set up their own event, or to thinking about ways that they can scale or improve their existing assets. I'd love to see more store narrative events. I'd love to see more armies on parade, anvils of apotheosis. One thing as well that you might have noticed is we haven't really spoken about 2K, and the reason is that, you know, I really like the idea of going at 1,000 or 1,500 points, because it allows you flexibility, but it also allows you to give people more time to create stories and not be so rushed. I think scaling it back a little bit creates opportunity to story tell and tell different stories than the traditional list that I've been running around at tournaments at 2K.
Yeah, because ultimately, if you've got 10 players at 1,500 points, ultimately the final game on day 2 could be 5 players on each side of the table. You've got a very big battle there that'll last a couple of hours. So and you're fully interacting across the table. So 100%. We're all in favour of small scale and different size games throughout the event. 500 points, 750, 1,000, 1,500, 2,000, whatever you get to. But yeah, you can start small and aim and end up big, definitely.
No,
and you're absolutely right, because it does give you, it frees up the time during the player's day to tell those stories and to interact more with their co-players.
Jimbo, are you going to say something?
No, I was going to agree.
What a surprise, Mitzy and Jimbo agree. Cut from the same cloth.
We don't always. I said wear black t-shirts today. He said, no, I'm wearing red and white.
No, I did wish you wore your Mitzy shirt. It's very cool. I do like that you've got shirts with Mitzy and Jimbo. I feel like I need one. I've still got my Mitzy and Jimbo beer opener as well. So
I tell you what, they are as rare as hen's teeth. Those things
are they?
Yeah, we need to get some new merch. Or once we've done some more content.
All right. Well, you've got a show here. It's been 2.5 hours of solid gold, 24 karat gold. I'm sure that all the likes are going to follow after this episode. But if people wanted to learn more about you guys, they want to learn more about your events. I know you have a YouTube channel. I've subscribed. Absolutely love your content. People want to learn more. Where do they find you?
So I guess the best place to start is on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is @EatBatsMitzy. That's all one word. Yes, EatBatsMitzy. Or you can find both of us on Twitter @Mitzy and Jimbo.
I've also been holding this off. It has nothing to do with COVID, does it? You're not eating bats.
No.
You're not eating bats. It has nothing to do with COVID, right? You weren't patient number 1, were you?
No, absolutely not. No, Eat Bats stands for East Anglian Tournament and Battle Squad. So,
because you can see where people would mistake Eat Bats. You're like,
radio. Absolutely, yeah. No. We've been around a lot longer than COVID.
Dear, oh dear. Yes. And if people want to find me, I'm @Jimbo9Jimbo. Also, we've got a Raw Twitter handle, which is @realms_@war_war. Sorry. And we also use the hashtag Raw, RAW, and then the year, so 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. You can search for all those for not just what we put out, but what our players put out as well. And also in the preparation up to each event, we use the hashtag Road to Raw, again, all the players, a lot of players post on that, just what they're building and just share it around with each other and have fun and interact. And it's brilliant. So, yeah.
And if people want to see more of those videos that I showed, Steve Foot, if you search on YouTube, Steve Foot, Foot with an E at the end, he has all those videos as well. So there's some very, very cool videos from Legends, Leviathan, Cog Forts, Aether Labs, insert name here that I've forgotten, but all the videos. There's a really cool gardening video where he's like tendering like it's
Silverneck is brilliant. Steve is @TimRacerSteve on Twitter, and Ming is @ThornShield. I'd also, while we're on, actually like to plug the Eat Bats crew. They're a good bunch of lads, mostly match play, but some narrative as well. And they actually have a podcast which is called Eat Bats of Sigmar. Again, you can find that on Twitter, or just go onto your normal podcast channels and just search for Eat Bats of Sigma. It's a real good listen. It's not regular content. They just do it whenever they fancy it, but it's nice, chilled out, and good to have a beer and do some model painting while you're listening to them.
You got people asking for Raw to come to Detroit, and hopefully this inspires some more narrative events that are going to happen across the world. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, absolutely. We've always liked the hashtag Raw on tour. So maybe one day it'll happen, but we'll need a shipping container to get the whole show up and running.
Well, listen, you pommies love to come to Australia, especially when it comes to summer. I've got the terrain, man. I've got four. I've counted. I now have 500 pieces of terrain, all 3D printed, all Games Workshop. Mate, run an event. You got my terrain. It's very realm themed, so I welcome you to our shores.
Sounds awesome. Love it.
That's very kind of you.
Thank you.
We will one day make that happen.
Twitter handles are in the channel description already. If not, they will be. Go check out their YouTube channel. It is really good. Enjoy the Hops Hoedown. Mitzy, Jimbo, it is an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing 2.5 hours of amazing content around narrative events. I hope you all enjoyed it, found something useful. Hopefully I see you at a narrative event and I start seeing your narrative ideas on Twitter, not Instagram. I'm useless as Instagram. But Mitzy, Jimbo, thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for having us.
And don't forget, name your characters. Mate, how good was that video? Surely it's going to go straight to the pool room. If you enjoyed that video, I would appreciate it if you crush that like button. And if you have an opinion, leave it in the comment section. That lets YouTube know it's a great video and it should share it with other Age of Sigmar players. Cheers to all the bloody legends here on the screen who have financially supported AOS Coach on Patreon on YouTube members. Their contributions have helped me improve the quality, frequency, and the variety of content on this channel. So cheers guys, you are bloody legends. Until the next video, don't forget to shoot the heroes and have a good one.